Uh, Good morning, everyone, and also good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in each part of this planet. I would like to welcome you back to day 3 of the 47 sessions of the Committee on World Food Security, CFS. And from last night, from evening session yesterday, I would like to express my sincere thanks for your great contribution, effort, and also your patience, your flexibilities that finally we could agree the draft decision or the draft conclusion of Agenda 3 and also draft decisions of Agenda 4A and 4B. Thank you again for your hard work, and also today is very special for us. Today, 10th of February 2021, is an extraordinary day. It is the World Pulses Day, which is worth our taking a moment to acknowledge and celebrate. In developing countries, pulses make up 75% of average diets, compared to 25% in industrialized countries. They are an affordable alternative to animal protein and are found in dishes like falafel, dal, chili, and baked beans. Pulses can be stored for months on and without longer any losing their high nutritional values. Values threat of smallholders, farmers who often depends on the food they store between harvests. It is worth knowing, since today we will discuss the sustainabilities of our food system, that is takes just 43 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of pulses, compared with 216 for soybean and 368 for peanuts. Pulses are extremely beneficial for women and our children because folate is a key nutrient during a period of rapid growth, such as pregnancy and infancy. And that's why today is very special that we celebrate the World Pulses Day. And thank you for those small farmers who helping us growing pulses for our nutritious food. Today is also an historic day for the Committee on World Food Security, CFS, and also for the entire UN family. During this agenda item, the committee members will be asked to endorse the draft CFS voluntary guideline on food systems and nutrition, which all of you know that you have invested your time, your energies through the long process over 5 years, and also during last year until this year, you have many meetings of negotiations and also others friends of the chair meeting. Thank you again for your great contribution and support until we have this draft voluntary guideline. Today we come to the end of the long process, as I mentioned earlier, that lead to the successful finalization of the voluntary guideline on food system and nutrition. And we start with the new, even more important and challenging phase that deal with the uptake and implementation of the voluntary guidelines to help support the development of coordinated and multi-sectoral national policies, laws, programs, and investment plans to achieve sustainable food system and that deliver healthy diets and improve our nutrition, which actually on the first day of the CFS, we have heard a lot from the statement of UN Secretary General read out by Special Envoy Agnes Kalibata, and also the 3 principles of the Rome-based agencies. We emphasize on the implementation and the uptake of the CFS products, in particular the voluntary guideline on food system and nutrition. Today's sessions is fully dedicated to the voluntary guidelines and will be divided into 2 segments. We will start by seeking your endorsement of the CFS voluntary guideline on food system and nutrition this morning. And in the afternoon, in this afternoon will be dedicated to an open and interactive discussion on their future implementation and uptake at the regional, national, and local level. And all of you who are one of champion who can bring the voluntary guideline into action, into the concrete action at your country, at your instituency. Before giving the floor to the chair of the open-ended working group, Ambassador Hans Hoekeveen, who is here with us today, with his wisdom, knowledge, experience, strenuous work, patience, diplomatic skill. Oh, I think he have full of qualities. I don't know how to mention. And also with his great leadership, he could manage to lead the group to consensus. And I would like to express my sincere thanks to Ambassador Hoekeveen, and also would like to take this opportunity to thank all the members or stakeholders of the CFS for your contribution and also for your support and flexibilities until we could finalize this voluntary guideline. And also would like to thank the whole team of our secretariat that they spend days and nights to support us during the negotiation and also during this process. And thank you, CFS Secretary, and also the whole team of Secretariat, which actually you did a great job to support us until we come to finalization of today for the endorsement. And we also we are expecting your full support and also for your continued support for this work. And now I would like to ask our CFS Secretary, Chris Hagedorn, to share some more detail how the process start and also how we really make a great contribution to this process. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As you said, Mr. Chair, this is a historic day for the CFS. We're about to present for endorsement a policy document that provides guidance on appropriate policies and interventions to address malnutrition in all its forms from a food systems perspective. These voluntary guidelines are the result of a long, highly inclusive and evidence-based preparatory process begun in 2015. Following the adoption of the CFS Vision on Nutrition in 2016 and the launch of the CFS High-Level Panel of Experts report on nutrition and food systems in October 2017, CFS stakeholders have worked hard providing inputs, feedback, and comments that inform the preparation of these guidelines. Several meetings were held in Rome, while 6 regional consultations took place in 2019 in Ethiopia, Thailand, Hungary, Egypt, Panama, and the United States of America to make sure the guidelines would align with regional and national priorities and needs. Following the release of the draft for negotiations in March 2019 and an unexpected pause due to the COVID-19 pandemic, 3 rounds of formal negotiations were held in September, December, and again at the end of January. This really was a collective effort. In this regard, I would like to warmly thank the Rome-based agencies for their constant support throughout the entire process. A special thanks goes to the Technical Task Team, its members and their organizations, FAO, WFP, IFAD, UN Nutrition, WHO, UNICEF, CGIAR, CSM, and PSM for their valuable contributions to the different versions of that document. I would also express my gratitude as CFS Secretary to the government of Germany for the generous contribution made in support of this policy process, especially to the organization of the regional consultations and the translation of the different versions of the document and interpretation during formal negotiations. I wish to express my appreciation for the work of the open-ended working group chair, Ambassador Hugeveen, for the enthusiasm he showed since assuming this role, and for his continued optimism, and of course for having led this process to a successful conclusion. Let me also thank previous open-ended working group chairs, Mr. Khaled El Tawil of Egypt and Ms. Lilian Ortega of Switzerland, who both did a tremendous job and made it possible for us to consider today the final version of these guidelines on food systems and nutrition. And of course, the work done by the CFS Secretariat team was tremendous, hour after long hour, setting up meetings, making documents available, supporting the chair, and arranging regional consultations, among other things. As with all our work, a true team effort worthy of praise. We also benefited from excellent translation, interpretation, including those from CSM who participated in many of the Friends of the Chair meetings, which were needed to get us through this broad and ambitious document. Before concluding, I would like to bring everyone's attention to the 2 background documents under discussion during this agenda item, namely session documents number 7, which are the voluntary guidelines, and number 8, a draft decision to be endorsed by plenary today. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and everyone else involved in this important process. Back to you.
Thank you very much, CFS Secretary, for your additional information that very interesting, and also we see how difficult that we move through this process, and without your contribution, without your support, we could not achieve. And also I just would like to encourage, because now actually last night we tried the new approach, because we know that now most of the time when we attend the virtual meeting, most of us keep the video off, and that's why now it's just only 35 delegates and also participants keep the camera on, and that's why I would like to encourage all delegates, participants and colleagues, if I don't disturb your privacy too much, or because we want to see your smiles, we want to see your active participation, and also to see what we can have such a kind of two-way communication, even though it's a virtual meeting. But anyway, if you can keep the camera on, it would be grateful, and also we can see your big smile, and also once we smile, we know that we are very happy, and that's why I do hope that finally you will endorse this voluntary guideline as well. Now I'm very pleased to give now the floor to the Food System and Nutrition Open-Ended Working Group Chairs, Ambassador Hans Hugeveen, who will provide an overview of the negotiation and also the final version of the voluntary guideline resulting from this intent process. Ambassador Hugeveen, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Tanawat, and thank you, especially you, for all your support during the long process of the negotiations, because I think that helped us extremely in getting the success where we are now. And as I was said also by Chris Hagendorn, our secretary, it was a collective and teamwork effort of all of us, all the members, all the stakeholders, the secretariat, to arrive at the point where we are now. And combating malnutrition in all its forms, undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, overweight and obesity, is one of the most pressing global challenges for countries nowadays. In recognition of these challenges, a few years ago, the Committee on Food Security decided to develop the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. And I think we had a very intense, I would say, process, skillfully led by the first chair of the Open-Ended Working Group, Mr. Khaled El Talwil of Egypt, as well as Lilian Ortega of Switzerland. They laid a firm basis for our negotiations starting of May last year. The voluntary guidelines have been produced with great attention to international outcomes of international summits and meetings like the ICN2, the SDGs, Agenda 2030, the Decade on Nutrition, and other UN resolutions, HLPF documents, as well as World Health Assembly declarations. And I think the upcoming UN Food System Summit and the Nutrition for Growth Summit are key signals how important the voluntary guidelines are and how crucial it is that they should be implemented. And I think in this context, the CFS voluntary guidelines are the only policy instrument being negotiated at the multilateral level on these matters within the UN. And after a 3.5-year process, which saw the active involvement of more than 500 representatives of governments, UN agencies, civil society and private sector, financial and research institutions, various preparatory meetings in Europe, Africa, Asia, Near East, Latin America, and North America, the negotiations on the voluntary guidelines ended with consensus and successfully last week. And when you look to the figures, I think we have had more than, or almost more than 48 meetings to arrive at this point. We have had more than 350 negotiation hours to arrive at this point. And again, it was and it is an outcome which we should be proud of. Of course, it were tough, intense, and sometimes very difficult negotiations. But I'm proud and admire the dedication of all the members, of all the stakeholders, and all those involved to show the flexibility, the willingness to compromise, and to arrive at a point where we have consensus. And of course, when you look to negotiations and when you look to compromises, we know that nobody is fully happy. But that's part, I think, of the integrity of the UN system. And the best compromise is a compromise where everybody is equally unhappy. And I do hope that with the hard work of all of us, dedication, we not only can endorse the voluntary guidelines, but also start implementing them. And the CFS voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition, we present a concrete tool in the hands of governments, UN agencies, civil society, private sector, financial institutions, and other development actors that can provide guidance on policies and interventions at local and national level to address malnutrition in all its form through a holistic food system perspective. And these guidelines represent a wide range of recommendations aimed at promoting policy coherence and reducing policy fragmentation between relevant sectors such as agriculture, health, education, environment, gender, social protection, trade, and employment, all of which have an impact on food systems and all of which have to be addressed at the national and local level. Special recommendations are included concerning actions toward the promotion of transparent and accountable governance, sustainable supply chains, access to healthy diets, affordable and accessible diets, food safety across the sustainable food systems, nutrition education, gender, equality, and resilient food systems in the humanitarian context. CFS has produced a relevant, concrete, and applicable tool to address malnutrition in all its forms with the voluntary guidelines. And indeed, I think it's an historic moment. It's an historic moment because the guidelines address all the dimensions of the food system. And I heard that the special envoy for the World Food Systems Summit has hired a firm to formulate concrete deliverables. But I think she should only look to the voluntary guidelines, because in the voluntary guidelines, we have those concrete deliverables. So I think the Food Systems Summit should not only take this as their basis for deliverables. The deliverables are in the voluntary guidelines, and they should strongly recommend and commit to implement them. Of course, I think we have to applaud all those who are involved. And sometimes when it was very tough, I thought in my head about the song "To Dream the Impossible Dream." Because on some moments I saw the text of that song where it says, "To dream the impossible dream, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far." But we came there together. And that's, I think, the success and the example how CFS is a unique body within the United Nations. A unique body to preserve. A unique body to work together with members and all stakeholders based on the integrity of the United Nations, based on the rules of procedure. And a special thanks, of course, goes to all those who behind the scenes, the team of the CFS Secretariat, and especially, of course, Emilio and Chris, the interpreters, the technicians, but also FVO conference services who helped us so much in difficult times to find, again, hours for negotiations. And of course, also to you, as I said, Mr. Chair, for your endless support, for pushing us towards a successful outcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and a pleasure for me to present to you for endorsement the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. To dream the impossible dream, which became possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador who convened Hans. And I have nothing to say. I think the thing that you mentioned is already covered all aspects that we gone through together during the last 5 years and also during the last year's negotiations. And I would like to thanks for your strenuous effort and your diligence in steering the open-ended working group to the successful outcome. Congratulations, congratulations. Before I'm opening the floor for statements, I asked the committee, this one is very, very important moment. That's why I would like to ask the committee whether we can now consider the endorsement of the CFS voluntary guideline on food system and nutrition by exclamation. Okay, or maybe we can clap the hands. At least we know that you agree. Yep. Thank you very much for your endorsement. Now I would like to give the floor to our members and also stakeholders of the CFS. First, as I mentioned, today is the World Pulses Day, and also the first speakers is Argentina, who is the chair of the steering committee of the World Pulses Day. And also now I would like to give the floor to our ambassadors of Argentina, please.
Gracias, presidente. En realidad había pedido la palabra antes, a los efectos, cuando usted le dedicó unos minutos al Día Mundial de las Legumbres, con el objetivo de decir que en honor a tratar de no afectar el curso del Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria, impulsamos la organización del evento principal del Día Mundial de las Legumbres este día viernes próximo, viernes 12, a las 3 horas p.m., horario Roma, en la cual tendremos, aparte de la intervención y la bienvenida del director general, un mensaje del Santo Padre, de la primera dama de la Argentina y de los ministros de Agricultura de Francia, de la India y de China, además de contar con la presencia de la doctora Calibata, del sector privado y de las mujeres rurales y de la Organización Internacional del Comercio. Este evento del Día Mundial de las Legumbres quiere hacer una unión con la visibilización del trabajo de las mujeres rurales. Por eso creemos que era importante referirlo e invitamos a todos los miembros a poder participar el día viernes a las 3 de la tarde de el evento importante, el evento principal sobre el Día Mundial de las Legumbres. Esa era la razón por la cual había pedido la palabra, presidente, sobre todo para entender que por el respeto a no interrumpir el proceso del Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria, decidimos hacer y organizar este evento el próximo día viernes. Gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, Ambassador of Argentina. Now I give the floor to Sudan, please. Sudan, please. Okay, otherwise, may I give the floor next to, Sudan, please.
نعم.
Yeah, please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله الأمين، وبعد. فرصة سعيدة وسعيد جدا أن أشارك في هذه المنصة العالمية، وشكري للسيد الرئيس اللجنة، وشكري للإخوة في هذا اليوم العالمي للبقوليات الذي يحتفل به العالم. وهذه البقوليات تستخدم كمخلفات في تغذية الماشية من في عملية التغذية. كذلك كثير من البقوليات في السودان مثل الفول السوداني والكبكبي والفول المصري. كذلك قامت الوكالة الفرنسية بإنشاء مشاريع عديدة للفول السوداني في دعم صغار المنتجين والمزارعين والنساء بالعمل في هذه المشاريع. وأدخل كذلك حديثا محصول فول الصويا، وتم زراعته بمشروع الجزيرة، وهو أكبر مشروع زراعي في العالم تحت مروي، تحت إدارة واحدة على مستوى العالم، ويتميز بأنه من أكبر المشاريع في أفريقيا، مساحة تقدر ب 2 مليون، ونجحت زراعته. كذلك نحن في السودان في هذه الفعالية يتميز السودان كقطر رائد في مجال الأمن الغذائي بميزات عديدة وبميزات مهمة في جانب الأمن الغذائي، والتحديات تمثل في التحديات التغذوية رغم الاهتمام الكبير بمسائل التغذية والاستراتيجيات التغذوية التي تقوم بها الدولة. هناك كثير من القضايا التي نواجهها في السودان، كذلك نواجه عملية تذبذب للإنتاج الزراعي، والبنية التحتية أيضا لها أثر كبير في عملية أو الإسهام في عملية الأمن الغذائي. كثير من الأوضاع في السودان الآن هي يعني أوضاع جيدة في ناحية العمل الغذائي، في ناحية خطة الصحة وتعزيز دور الصحة والرعاية الصحية الأولية في السودان. ولدينا كذلك مخرجات ومنتجات كبيرة وتقارير ومتابعة على المستوى القاعدي، على مستوى الولايات وعلى مستوى المدن وعلى مستوى حتى الولايات، بمتابعة الأوضاع التغذوية والوصول إلى أهم المشكلات الغذائية ومعالجتها. نحن في السودان نهتم بالربط بين جميع العوامل التي تؤثر في الأمن الغذائي، العوامل الاقتصادية، العوامل الاجتماعية، والعوامل الفنية من توفير الغذاء وآخره، وكذلك الأثر المتبقي والأثر الناتج من استخدام الغذاء في عملية التغذية. وفي خاتمة مداخلتي أرجو أن تسمحوا لي أن أحيل هذا المنبر إلى الأستاذة فاطمة الحسن الطاهر، وهي الأمين العام للأمانة الفنية للأمن الغذائي بالسودان، فلتتفضل بعد السنة.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. كل الشكر للجنة الأمن الغذائي العالمية لإتاحة هذه الفرصة الثمينة الغالية بالنسبة لنا، لأننا نستطيع أن من خلالها أن نطرح كل قضايا الأمن الغذائي والتغذية ونجد الحلول. بالمناسبة أنا سعيدة جدا للموافقة أو المصادقة على الخطوط التوجيهية، وشاركت في مراجعتها النسخة الأولى، وأرى أن من الأهمية بمكان التزام الدول الأعضاء، لأننا يمكننا أن نطلع بكثير من السياسات ووضع استراتيجية للأمن الغذائي والتغذية بالدول الأعضاء. كذلك هنالك حوجة لوجود إنذار مبكر متعدد الأحداث ومتعدد الكوارث والصدمات بالنسبة لما يواجهه العالم في هذه الفترة من صدمات، من أهمها بالنسبة للسودان فيضانات كوفيد-19 ودورها وأثرها في الأمن الغذائي وفي الزراعة، وكذلك الارتفاع المتوالي والسريع في أسعار السلع الغذائية. وهنالك حوجة لتوعية متخذي القرار بكل هذه الدول بأهمية الخطوط التوجيهية وأهمية الالتزام بما جاء فيها، لأنه أنا أتوقع أنها ستفيد كثيرا جدا جدا وتساهم في تحسين أوضاع الأمن الغذائي والتغذية. تحتاج أيضا الدول لبناء الصمود، لأن هنالك فئات هشة تحتاج لتدخلات كثيرة جدا جدا حتى تستطيع مقاومة هذه الصدمات وهذه الكوارث حين حدوثها. وأشكركم جزيلا أولا وأخيرا على هذه الفرصة الثمينة الغالية. شكرا.
Thank you very much, Sudan. Before I give the floor to Brazil, I also would like to ask to inform you that we also will have the 3 minutes for our statement, and for 5 minutes for minister, vice ministers, or CSM and PSM and regional group as well. Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Brazil, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you, to everyone. Before I start, I'd like to thank the invitation made by the Ambassador of Argentina for this important event on Friday, and also stress the invitation that everyone would participate. Thank you. I'd like to commend the able conduction of the discussions during the negotiations of the RP of the Netherlands, Ambassador Hans Hoogeveen, rapporteur of the policy convergence process. His comprehensive and tireless work allowed us to be here today, endorsing the voluntary guidelines for food systems and nutrition. It's important also to recognize the work of Ms. Liliana Ortega from Switzerland, who conducted the process towards the construction of a quality document, a proper and comprehensive basis for the negotiations. Our debates show that change in food systems are to be encouraged in a coherent manner, in accordance and taking into account the national context and its capabilities. In addition, that the food system approach is fundamental for a world free from hunger and malnutrition, and for achieving the SDGs. Likewise, the participation of countries in global value chains is relevant with due regard to regional initiatives and the multilateral trade system. The need to consider all forms of approaches, systems, instruments, and innovations is recommended to support members in their efforts to sustainable food systems through independent, neutral, balanced, science and evidence-based guidance. Specifically, when regarding consumption and nutrition patterns that affect consumer choices, it is important to underline the role of food environments in shaping eat behaviors and individual choices. On this issue, it is known that food choices are influenced by individual determinants, such as experience, knowledge, personal factors, availability of resources, and perceptions of healthy foods, and collective ones, including economic, social, and cultural factors that are associated with the conformation of the system and influence the practice of food choices. Mr. Chair, we would like to caution against the risk of the discussions within the CFS resemble those of governing bodies of the RBAs, the ones which generate agreement and new language. If this happens, the first harm is to the policy product itself. On the contrary, we understand that the guidelines and all CFS, all the CFS products, as special and powerful tools to be used in terrain, not only helping policymakers, but also the food system workers and all people around the world to be able to combat malnutrition. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, ambassadors of Brazil. Now I give the floor to Mexico, Undersecretary of Mexico, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Saludos a los miembros, participantes y observadores del Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria de la FAO. En primer lugar, quiero hacer un reconocimiento al presidente y al grupo de amigos que después de varias horas y días de trabajo y gran habilidad de diálogo y consenso, hicieron posible llegar al día de hoy con esta propuesta de directrices voluntarias. No obstante, debemos reconocer que es necesario perfeccionar dichos procedimientos a fin de incorporar las importantes contribuciones del mecanismo de la sociedad civil. Para el gobierno de México, encabezado por el presidente Andrés Manuel López Obrador, el problema de la inseguridad alimentaria y la malnutrición exige una transformación del sistema alimentario vigente para construir uno que sea justo, saludable, sustentable y competitivo, con un enfoque centrado en el bienestar de la población y en los derechos humanos. Los sistemas agroalimentarios constituyen una serie de eslabones que van desde las condiciones medioambientales, la producción de alimentos, las cadenas de suministro y valor, los ambientes alimentarios y el comportamiento del consumidor. Esto implica que las problemáticas de cada eslabón y su atención no pueden verse de forma aislada, sino en un espectro más amplio para poder articularse y alinearse en función de un objetivo superior. Esto es, la construcción de un nuevo sistema alimentario y nutricional con un enfoque de bienestar, salud y sustentabilidad. En este sentido, consideramos que nuestro país está en la ruta que sugieren las directrices y las recomendaciones del informe 12 y 15 del GANESAN. Los cambios del sistema alimentario en México que están siendo conducidos por el Grupo Intersecretarial de Salud, Alimentación, Medio Ambiente y Competitividad, GISAMAC por sus siglas, está conformado por las distintas entidades y dependencias del gobierno que tienen injerencia en los sistemas alimentarios, como son las Secretarías de Salud, Agricultura, Medio Ambiente, Economía, Ciencia, Tecnología y Pueblos Indígenas, así como los representantes de la sociedad civil y organismos internacionales. A través del GISAMAC, en los 2 años pasados, se han logrado las primeras acciones transformadoras. 1. Etiquetado frontal de advertencia en alimentos ultraprocesados y bebidas con azúcares añadidas, el cual recibió mención de la OMS-OPS como uno de los mejores del mundo. 2. Campaña de comunicación alimentación saludable, encabezada por el propio presidente López Obrador para impulsar dietas saludables y mejores hábitos de consumo. 3. Decreto presidencial para la prohibición de la siembra de maíz transgénico y el retiro gradual y progresivo del uso del glifosato en México para el 31 de enero del 2024. 4. Estrategia Nacional de Transición Agroecológica, revalorizando el papel y el conocimiento tradicional de los campesinos, productores de pequeña escala y pueblos indígenas. 5. Programa Sembrando Vida, que impulsa la siembra de 1 millón de hectáreas con árboles frutales y forestales bajo principios de la agroecología, involucrando a 400,000 campesinos y campesinas. 6. Al inicio de la pandemia se trabajó desde GISAMAC junto a representantes de empresas y de jornaleros agrícolas para atender el reto para los jornaleros y sus familias ante la COVID-19. 7. Se publicó conjuntamente en el Instituto Nacional de Salud Pública, FAO, la OPS y OMS, UNICEF y GISAMAC, el documento Prevención de mala nutrición en niñas, niños y adolescentes en México ante la pandemia de COVID-19, recomendaciones dirigidas a tomadores de decisiones. Con base en esta experiencia, el día de hoy celebramos la aprobación y adopción de las directrices. No obstante, consideramos que este es solo el inicio, es un punto de partida que nos obliga como naciones y pueblos a asumir compromisos más ambiciosos sin perder de vista la realidad de cada uno de los miembros del CSA y considerando el aporte invaluable del mecanismo de la sociedad civil. Para el Gobierno de México y el GISAMAC será muy grato y enriquecedor compartir e intercambiar su experiencia con las naciones que forman parte de la región. Seguiremos subrayando en este y otros foros la importancia de transitar hacia sistemas agroalimentarios justos, saludables y sustentables que impulsen la agroecología y otros enfoques innovadores, que valoricen y visibilicen el papel de los campesinos, productores de pequeña escala y pueblos indígenas, que fomenten el consumo de alimentos saludables y entre ellos los frescos y de producción local, que promuevan y respalden la lactancia materna exclusiva en los primeros meses de vida y la continuación con alimentación apropiada hasta los 2 años o más, que promuevan la democratización en la determinación de las políticas alimentarias sin conflicto de intereses y acotando la excesiva influencia de las corporaciones alimentarias globales. Termino con un exhorto a la comunidad internacional en tiempos de la pandemia de coronavirus. Alimentos saludables y vacunas para todos los pueblos del mundo. Muchas gracias.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mexico. Now I give the floor to Malaysia, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning and good day to everyone. Malaysia, on the onset, would like to congratulate the Chair, Ambassador Hans, and all parties and member states in the successful outcome in the formation of and the finalization of the CFS voluntary guidelines, which was done, I must say, in the spirit of unity and cooperation. Malaysia welcomes the CFS voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition, which aims to achieve sustainable food systems and towards improved nutrition. The guidelines emphasized the importance of resilient food systems while providing guidance to relevant stakeholders in designing policies, framework, strategies, and programs. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, We emphasize the importance to recognize healthy sources of saturated fats and the health benefits. We further acknowledge the diversity of health diets, taking into consideration different national realities, the geographical, social, demographic, and cultural element, as well as the context availability of food from local, regional, and international sources and dietary customs. Responding to the global strong challenges caused by shocks, primarily the current pandemic, as well as the economic, social, and environmental crises, we reiterate the need to have a more comprehensive approach to achieving healthy diets through sustainable food systems. This can be accomplished by addressing the sustainability issues and direct and indirect impacts. Finally, we like to emphasize that while we recognize the diversity and complexity of our food systems and the call to promote policy coherence and coordination, considering the cost benefits and trade-offs, we must also take into account national capacities and priorities. I would also here like to take the opportunity to thank Ambassador of Argentina, my dear friend, in this invitation for us to join in a very important World Pulse Day, and which we will be participating. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your statement. Now I give the floor to Venezuela, please.
Muy buenos días. Gracias, señor presidente. Agradecemos al embajador de Argentina por la invitación para el día viernes. Cuente con nuestra presencia. Estimado presidente, antes de referirnos al documento del debate, quisiéramos hacer un reconocimiento al presidente del Grupo de Trabajo de Composición Abierta, el embajador Hans Hugenberg, por su constante búsqueda del consenso y un reconocimiento en especial a los que contribuyeron a la organización, ya que se contó durante el proceso de la negociación con traducción. Esto permitió un incremento importante en la participación. La República Bolivariana de Venezuela expresa su satisfacción y respalda la aprobación del documento referente a las directrices voluntarias del Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria sobre los sistemas alimentarios y la nutrición. Destaca el proceso inclusivo en el desarrollo del mismo. La crisis del COVID-19 visibilizó la resiliencia de los sistemas alimentarios en tiempo real. Esto permitió que en la negociación de estas directrices se pudiera incorporar algunos lineamientos que apuntasen a la sostenibilidad de los sistemas alimentarios. Sin embargo, este sigue siendo un camino que debe monitorearse porque aún estamos en tiempos de COVID-19, con efectos devastadores, aumentando las desigualdades y la inseguridad alimentaria. La directriz voluntaria es un documento perfectible, pero será su puesta en práctica la que verificará en qué medida dichas directrices contribuyen a alcanzar los sistemas alimentarios sostenibles, resilientes y que procuren la mejora de la nutrición, por lo que hay que dejar una puerta abierta para la mejora de las mismas. Señor presidente, queremos invitar a todos los miembros y partes interesadas a socializar el documento para su discusión y adopción voluntaria a nivel regional, nacional y local, en función de las realidades internas de cada país. El éxito en la aplicación de las directrices pasa por el respeto al derecho internacional y la autodeterminación de los pueblos. Y en este sentido, rectificamos lo expresado en la resolución de la Asamblea General 75/179 sobre el derecho a la alimentación, en particular, que no se usen los alimentos como instrumento de presión política o económica, así como la necesidad de abstenerse de aplicar medidas unilaterales que no estén en consonancia con el derecho internacional y con la Carta y que pongan en peligro la seguridad alimentaria y nutricional. Para cerrar, quisiéramos resaltar las palabras del secretario general de la ONU, Kofi Annan. El mundo tiene suficiente comida, lo que falta es la voluntad política para asegurar que toda la gente tenga acceso a esta abundancia, que toda la gente disfrute de la seguridad alimentaria. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Venezuela. Now I give the floor to Indonesia, followed by China, please.
Indonesia. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Handevi from Indonesia. Okay. Are you here?
We have noise, background noise. Maybe,
okay.
no, we still have this problem. Maybe we'll come back with you later. I will ask a technician to help you. Now
Okay.
you go to China, please. China, please.
谢谢主席，各位同事，大家好。我们首先向世界豆类日表示祝贺。我们知道豆类在确保粮食系统多样化以及这个保障粮食安全和营养方面发挥重要作用。本周五，我们中国驻罗马的大使将代表新上任的中国的农业农村部部长专门会去讲话。粮食系统和营养资源准则有助于推动实现粮食系统的转型，符合2020年全球粮食安全和营养状况报告的基本命题，也体现了迈向2030年的全球粮食安全和营养报告的一些核心理念和政策要求。我们对主席在该资源准则磋商中起到的重要的组织协调和推动作用表示感谢，也感谢各个成员国本着协商一致的精神，达成这一来之不易的共识。我们认为和粮安委的其他一些政策产品一样，资源准则发挥作用的关键在于落地，在于切实有效的实施。为此，资源准则在实施推广过程中，应该借鉴以往的经验，加强宣传，鼓励和推动各国政府结合本国的实际，采取相应的具体措施。同时，要推动该资源准则与负责任的农业投资、土地权属的资源准则等国际的准则的相互的协同促进作用，提高对政策的一致性协同支持作用。此外，还要特别关注农村的生产者，尤其是农村贫困人口以及其他弱势群体，在粮食系统转型中所面临的特别挑战和机遇，做好相关的政策安排。在当今时代，技术和创新在粮食系统的重构和转型过程中发挥越来越重要的作用。我们要推动现代信息技术在粮食系统中的应用，比如说大数据、电子商务等等，不断的提高粮食生产水平，减少食物浪费，改进整个食物的生产、供应、消费以及价值链上面的效率。谢谢主席。我的发言结束了，谢谢主席。
Thank you very much, China. Now I give the floor to Republic of Korea, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Korea highly appreciates the open-ended working group and its chair, Ambassador Hueben, for their full dedication to every process toward this document. My delegation recognizes that this guideline is a great achievement based on collective effort and inclusive consultation with many stakeholders. We regard the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition extremely important within the challenges we are facing now, such as global pandemic, climate change, and man-made conflicts. We express our great satisfaction on most part of the document in overall, including the 6 guiding principles and 7 focus areas. Among various sections herein, particularly, we are supportive to the inclusion of women and youth. This is based on my government's notion that women and youth are not only vulnerable groups in the fields, but also these groups are inevitable actors for maintaining our food system healthy and sustainable. My delegation also agrees to the point that the food system is complicatedly intertwined with multidimensional activities, subjects, and resources. In this context, we are fully We fully support the voluntary guidelines' nature to be interpreted and applied in accordance with national legal systems and their institution. This characteristic well aligns with the basic concept of the title voluntary guideline itself. Moreover, this will enlarge and widen the potential of its usage and application further. In this regard, we also recommend CFS Secretariat, as well as all Rome-based agencies and other development actors, to actively use this document in supporting many member states and others in the fields. With these comments, the Republic of Korea endorses the voluntary guideline on food system nutrition. We sincerely hope this guideline to be served as one of the foundation material in the preparation of the UN Food System Summit as well. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Republic of Korea. Now I give the floor to New Zealand, followed by Eritrea, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, like others, I'd like to express my thanks to our open-ended working group chair, Ambassador Hugaveen, for his help in navigating this process. I've been amazed at his calmness, positivity, and persistence in getting us over the line despite difficult constraints, concern with COVID-19, and an increasingly busy schedule for member countries to engage. I agree with his comments, along with those of the Secretary. The guidelines are a significant milestone. As we know, food systems are incredibly broad and have many interconnecting parts, many of which are sensitive and are interpreted differently in the diverse range of country contexts. These guidelines have been a testing ground for the Food Systems Summit and for food systems theory and practice at all levels. The concepts, issues, assumptions, and realities concerning many of the sensitive issues being grappled with in the summit process and wider have been tested extensively and debated thoroughly through this lengthy CFS process. The result is the reality of where countries, private sector, civil society groups, and international experts could reach a compromise, noting the range of available and valid approaches that can comprise sustainable food systems. The guidelines are therefore a critical resource for the summit process, as the groundwork has been done through our efforts, and the guidelines and learnings from the process and the end product deserve to be widely reviewed in that context. New Zealand endorses the guidelines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, New Zealand, for your support. Now I give the floor to Eritrea, followed by Philippines, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, for providing me the floor. As usual, we appreciate the way you are sharing. Good morning, good evening, good day, wherever you are, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Eritrea had the pleasure to deliver a statement on the 47th CFS session on voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. Mr. Chairperson, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, Eritrea appreciates FAO for the successful work it has accomplished and commend the Secretariat and CFS for organizing the 47th session. And more importantly, the open-ended group and Ambassador Hugaveen for their successful work. Mr. Chairperson, Eritrea expresses its appreciation for the work accomplished on the voluntary guidelines on food system and nutrition. The voluntary guidelines on food system and nutrition support the development and enhancement and implementation of coordinated and multi-sectoral national policies, programs, investment plans, and various regional food security and nutrition initiatives. Hence, we encourage all CFS stakeholders to support and promote at all levels with their constituency, and recommend all stakeholders to share lessons learned from the voluntary guidelines in order to assess their continued relevance, effectiveness, and impact. The Committee Food Security Product on Voluntary Guidelines and food system and nutrition is pertinent and very important as a tool for nationals and multi-stakeholders which could promote sustainable food systems and address malnutrition in all its forms, as well as related social, economic, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, Eritrea underlines the valuable input of the voluntary guidelines will provide. To that extent, Eritrea appreciates the coordination of the three Rome-based UN agencies for their further consideration regarding supporting the utilization at country level in line with country requests and consider and ensure the wide dissemination of the voluntary guidelines. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Eritrea. Now I give the floor to Philippines, followed by Indonesia, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Chair. The Philippines is pleased to have actively engaged in crafting of this historic set of guidelines in pursuit of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs. We laud the exemplary leadership of the current chairperson, Ambassador Hans Huguven, and the previous chairs, the patience and the efficiency of the Secretariat, and the tenacity and collective spirit of all participants. We wish to highlight a few important features of the guidelines. Number one, it recognizes diversity and complexity of food systems and diets, as well as national capacities and priorities. Many Asian diets follow a distinct pattern based on centuries-old customs and traditions, and on the availability and affordability of food from local and other sources. In the Philippines, for instance, coconut and coconut products are regarded as healthy sources of medium-chain saturated fats, which is plant-based and different from animal-based ones. We therefore urge the fair treatment and reporting of risk and benefits of all nutrients based on evolving science, research, and evidence. Number two, the guidelines should be able to strengthen the involvement in the food systems and value chains of vulnerable sectors, notably the rural population, infants and young children, the youth, persons with disability, and indigenous people, fisher folks, pastoralists, and smallholders and family farmers. And number three, it should help speed up actions to enhance the resilience and adaptive capacity of food systems, the mobilization of financial and human resources, capacity building, and transfer of technologies to developing countries. In this light, the Philippines endorses the voluntary guidelines and enjoin everyone to use this instrument in realizing our goals of eradicating poverty, ending hunger, achieving food security, and improving nutrition from a food system perspective, leaving no one behind. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Philippines, for your remarks. Now I give the floor to Indonesia, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hope that this is okay. My
very
voice?
good, very good.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for this interruption. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Indonesia has noted with appreciation the final draft of the voluntary guidelines on food system and nutrition. Indonesia congratulate the Ambassador Van Given for his inclusive, flexible, yet firm leadership in guiding the open-ended working group and the friends of the chair to elaborate this document. Indonesia also commends the work of all member states in the open-ended working group as well as friends of the chairs to find compromises for the good of the people. We also commend the work and contribution of all stakeholders, namely civil society mechanism and private sector mechanism, as well as various UN bodies and mechanisms. Your contribution have not only enriched the discussion and the text, but also kept as grounded of the situation of the ground. Mr. Chairperson, The voluntary guidelines on food system and nutrition is important step for us to progress with regard to sustainable food system and improve nutrition based on the 3 dimensions of sustainable development. The guidelines reflect the diversity and complexity of food system with the aims of promoting policy coherence and coordination, considering benefits, costs, and trade-off, while recognizing national capacities and priorities, and fostering and guiding an inclusive dialogue among different institutions, sectors, and all relevant stakeholders on the food system. Now, it is our common task to implement them in line with our national priorities. We must make these guidelines a reality of the ground. For that, we stand ready to work collaboratively with all relevant stakeholders. The voluntary and non-binding nature of the guidelines, we believe, make them more agile and adaptable to be implemented. With the above notes, Indonesia support the document of CFS 2021-45, document 7, the voluntary on food system and nutrition, to be endorsed by the CFF 47. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Indonesia. Now I give the floor to Switzerland. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Switzerland would like to thank and commend the working group chair, Ambassador Hans Oogheven, and all those working in and for the CFS Secretariat for the stamina and commitment to bringing this negotiation process on the CFS voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition to conclusion. Negotiating almost entirely in a virtual space and on the platform that all of us have become all familiar with over the last year has been an experiment without precedents for everyone involved. And that's doubtless also a little bit complicated and prolonged the negotiation. Switzerland is aware that in many respects, what we agreed upon might fail to go beyond the current status quo. For this reason, in our view, these guidelines, rather than representing the final destination on this journey, are more wayposts in the inevitably necessary food system transformation. What people eat needs to be healthy for people and for the planet. But on the optimistic side, the guidelines acknowledge the critical interlinkages between sustainable production and healthy and sustainable consumption. And we hope that they will represent a first common understanding as we jointly move towards a food system summit and then beyond with the achievement of the Agenda 2030 at the horizon. There is more work to do in order to make the guidelines fit for purpose. There will be a need to provide the tools to assist those trying to move from policy to practice within the respective environments and jurisdictions. Accordingly, further discussion and steps towards a sustainable dissemination, uptake, and implementation of the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition are important. Both the UN Food System Summit 2021 and the planned forum dialogue and uptake of the CFS voluntary guidelines on food system and nutrition during the CFS 48 offer this opportunity for this. For Switzerland, in this context, it is particularly important to assure also the support of the CSM as civil society is one of the main stakeholders when it comes to the application of the guidelines moving forward. So in consequence, Switzerland acknowledged the conclusions of the negotiations of the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition and accepts the final text as was made available to use last weekend. However, in line with our national procedures, due to the short notice, Switzerland will not be at liberty to formally endorse the guidelines until our internal process completed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. Now I give the floor to US, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, and colleagues. I want to first ask for your patience this morning, as our intervention does include an explanation of position, so it might slightly go over 3 minutes. First of all, congratulations. The voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition are the endpoint of an enormous effort by the Committee on World Food Security to reach consensus on a set of recommendations to improve performance across food systems for nutrition. Thus, we'd like to extend our gratitude to the chair, Ambassador Hoogeveen, and the prior chairs as well. These voluntary guidelines are ambitious as they seek to enhance food system performance across the 3 pillars of sustainability: environmental, economic, and social. They offer advice on building more sustainable food systems and improving nutrition for all, for current and future generations. Importantly, the voluntary guidelines do not categorize some food systems or agricultural approaches as sustainable or unsustainable. Our efforts to improve the sustainability of agriculture must be evaluated against measurable outcomes at the appropriate level on food affordability and accessibility, farmer income and well-being, and environmental indicators. These guidelines acknowledge we must do the hard work of assessing real impacts and outcomes. The guidelines also highlight that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to improving nutrition or to improving the sustainability of agriculture or food systems, and that recommendations should be adapted to local contexts. As a result, the voluntary guidelines largely avoid overly prescriptive approaches that limit the ability of governments to develop solutions. These voluntary guidelines recognize the vital role of the private sector in plays in promoting healthy diets and more sustainable food systems. Reaching these twin goals is an endeavor that truly requires all sectors to work together. Perhaps most importantly, these guidelines lay the foundation for a sustainable food systems approach to food security and nutrition that recognizes the complexity of food systems and the fact that decisions made at one point in the system can reverberate throughout the system. This approach seeks to balance the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development, and it recognizes the need to assess and manage trade-offs. The balanced, holistic, sustainable food systems approach outlined in these voluntary guidelines provides a strong foundation for our efforts to build more sustainable food systems in advance of the United Nations Food Systems Summit. We would like to note that the United States interprets the section on the makeup of healthy diets to call for regional and cultural flexibility in dietary patterns which best support their populations to consume healthy diets. We also interpret nutrients of public health concern to be both important nutrients that are required but consumed below recommendations, such as dietary fiber, or those that people consume too much of, such as sodium. As we mentioned during the negotiations, there remain issues in the guidelines that the United States does not fully support, despite our best efforts at working toward consensus. Therefore, this morning, the United States endorses these guidelines with an explanation of position. Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask that this explanation of position that I'm about to present be included full text as an annex in the committee's plenary report. We also request a footnote be added to the page in which the committee endorses the guidelines. In that footnote, we'd request that notes the U.S. explanation of position. Mr. Chair, with your patience, I will now read our explanation of position at dictation speed so that it can be entered into the record. Following that, we will provide a textual copy to the Secretariat. The explanation of position. Paragraph 3.2.4d of the guidelines. We interpret the comment on agreed relevant international and national standards to mean that the guidelines should be complementary to standards adopted by international standards setting bodies and adapted to national contexts, given that national standards do not need agreement from outside parties. We emphasize that specific recommendations contained in the guidelines should be considered as one option out of many possible tools depending on local contexts. Paragraph 40 of the guidelines. These guidelines should be applied consistent with other instruments only as far as each of these instruments are relevant and applicable, and as far as they have been agreed, acknowledged, and/or endorsed by respective member states, and without prejudice to prevailing international agreements. The United States underscores that paragraph 18 of the 2030 Agenda calls for countries to implement the agenda in a manner that is consistent with the rights and obligations of states under international law. We further note that the 2030 Agenda is non-binding and does not create or affect rights or obligations under international law, nor does it create any new financial commitments. We also highlight our mutual recognition that 2030 Agenda implementation must respect and be without prejudice to the independent mandates of other processes and institutions, including negotiations, and does not prejudge or serve as precedent for decisions and actions underway in other fora. Paragraph 44 of the guidelines. Economic sanctions, whether unilateral or multilateral, can be a successful means of achieving foreign policy objectives. In cases where the United States has applied sanctions, we have used them with specific objectives in mind, including as a means to promote a return to rule of law or democratic systems, to insist on the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms.
US, could you please conclude your statement, or otherwise you can send us the text to the secretariat and then we will take care of it. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll quickly run through the remaining paragraphs, but we do ask that our full text be included as a footnote to the report. We, as I said, had paragraph 44 of the guidelines. Regarding paragraph 45 of the guidelines, we note that the negotiations to eliminate agricultural export subsidies referenced in that paragraph were finalized during the 10th World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference. And we maintain that it is incorrect to imply that the Doha Development Round negotiations were concluded on these issues, and any reference to Doha Development Agenda should be avoided. In paragraph 65 of the guidelines, we will provide specific language that outlines that CFS must respect the independent mandates of other processes and institutions, specifically the WTO. For paragraph 66 of the guidelines, we call attention to a language that refers to the 2030 Agenda. For paragraphs 3.1.1c and 3.3.1a of the guidelines, we have two items of concern. Again, we will provide the full text, but this concern revolves around blending references from the Sustainable Development Goals with references to multilateral trade under the purview of the WTO. Finally, Mr. Chair, paragraph 3.1.4a of the guidelines regard the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and we will provide language that outlines our views on that. Mr. Chairman, again, with the provision that the full text of our explanation of position be included in the report, the United States can endorse these guidelines. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much for your statement. Now I give the floor to Turkey, please, and then followed by Thailand.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you, all of you, for all efforts and valuable contributions, and we highly appreciate and find very valuable all efforts and voluntary guidelines for ensuring food and nutrition security. I would like to draw your attention to importance of seed for ensuring food security in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 crisis has been the most critical pandemic that has been faced in recent years in the world and has brought the service and activities to a halt. But food security is essential and obliged to continue. For food security, seed sector plays a vital role in the crisis time to sustain the delivery of seed to farmers in order to protect the supply chain. The governments, seed companies, and farmers has to sustain seed production, cleaning, packaging, lab work, distribution, and trade of seed. The farmers' work is critical to ensure the growth of crops during the planting season to prevent any food shortage in the long run. In that context, farmers need stable access to quality and sufficient seeds and other essential agricultural inputs in order to produce healthy crops. Moreover, seed is a globally traded agricultural product. Policymakers should create an enabling environment for trade in line with the relevant international agreements to ensure food security. Therefore, seed trade can fuel transformation of food systems. Increasing seed trade volume will enhance intergovernmental collaboration. The impact analysis and risk assessment of the pandemic on the seed sector is a key attempt in order to identify how to mitigate the impact of pandemic on seed sector. In order to identify the impacts of COVID-19 in the seed sector, a TAIEX event will be organized in Turkey this year. An assessment report which will be useful and unique guidance for agricultural organizations, Turkish governments and EU institutions on how to enact adequate policies and measures that can mitigate the impact of virus on seed supply and trade for building resilience of farmers will be main output of the event. Seed plays a vital role in agriculture as starting point and as a way to introduce new varieties from research institutes to farmers. Also, modern growing techniques and optimum input use for further improvement in yield should be more promoted. Climate change negatively affects plant physiology, metabolism, soil fertility, carbon sequestration, microbial activity, and biodiversity. So it is considered that more research and investment in increasing crop resilience should be made. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Turkey. And now I give the floor to Thailand, followed by Dominican Republic, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Thailand congratulates the Chair, Ambassador Hook Kalvin, and the CFS Secretariat team for their continued engagement and effort in leading these negotiations. Thailand would like to thank all members for their strong contributions and the successful conclusion of these negotiations. We believe that these voluntary guidelines provide meaningful guidance for attaining food security and nutrition and are an important input for the preparation of the upcoming UN Food System Summit. Thailand endorsed the voluntary guidelines on food system and nutrition and take note of their voluntary as non-binding basis. We look forward to the implementation of this guideline at all levels. Mr. Chair, Thailand is engaged to end hunger and malnutrition in all its forms, and food security and nutrition are a top national priority. The government promotes healthy diets and well-being at all life stages, with particular focus on early life stage. dealing with exclusive breastfeeding is encouraged. Thai government recently adopted new economic model for inclusive and sustainable growth called Bio-Circular Green Economy Model or BCG model. In order to support the BCG model, the Urban Agriculture Project was initiated to emphasize on the sustainable natural resource utilization. The National Policy on Infant and Young Child Feeding has the target to attain by 2025 that at least 50% of Thai infants are exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of life. The campaign Empower Parents Enable Breastfeeding was launched by the government of Thailand in collaboration with WHO and UNICEF to raise awareness on the importance and benefits of breastfeeding. In order to enable equal and equitable access to healthy diet to sustainable food system, the government stimulates local production of healthy food by providing equitable access to natural resources to rural farmers and fishermen, including women and youth. The government also promotes local processing and marketing of healthy food in order to increase their local availability. Edible insects are promoted as powerful components of sustainable healthy diets. In Thailand, insect farming not only provides affordable nutrition food, but is also an important source of income that improves the life of many smallholders, especially women, since most of the small-scale entrepreneurs in this industry are women. Thank you, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thailand. Now I give the floor to Dominican Republic, followed by Canada, please.
Damos al embajador Hogan, a usted, señor presidente, al secretariado y a todos los involucrados en este proceso histórico para el CSA y para la lucha contra el hambre y todas las formas de malnutrición. Hemos llegado aquí gracias a nuestro esfuerzo común, es decir, a nuestro sentido de responsabilidad ante el mandato recibido, nuestra determinación moral ante el escándalo del hambre y nuestra voluntad política de alcanzar el objetivo de desarrollo sostenible de hambre cero. Este resultado, como todos los productos de política del CSA, emerge en la escena internacional con autoridad, prestigio y vigor debido a que se expresión concreta del carácter inclusivo del CSA. Nos complace que el documento cubra todas las dimensiones de los sistemas alimentarios y refleja los conceptos indispensables para su transformación sostenible y sustentable. Todo ello a partir del derecho humano fundamental a la alimentación adecuada, porque quien no está en capacidad de ejercer el derecho a nutrirse no puede disfrutar de ningún otro derecho. Destacamos que las directrices reconocen el papel clave de los agricultores familiares, de los mercados locales y de la igualdad de género, incluyendo los desafíos de la pandemia y la crisis del clima. Las directrices, como instrumento negociado por los Estados miembros y todos los actores relevantes de la causa contra el hambre, constituyen desde ya la base de la Cumbre de Naciones Unidas sobre los sistemas alimentarios. Por estos motivos, y haciendo nuestros los argumentos expresados a favor del documento, la delegación dominicana se une a la aprobación de las directrices. Igual como hicimos con las directrices sobre el derecho a la alimentación y todos los demás productos de políticas del CSA, República Dominicana incorporará las recomendaciones, recordando que nuestro ordenamiento jurídico reconoce el derecho a la alimentación con rango constitucional, incluye una ley especial sobre soberanía y seguridad alimentaria y nutricional. Las directrices que estamos aprobando fortalecerán todos los eslabones de la cadena productiva. En nuestros diálogos inclusivos que reproducen el modelo del CSA, contaremos, como siempre, con el acompañamiento de la FAO, del FIDE y el PMA y las demás agencias especializadas del sistema de Naciones Unidas. Señor presidente, colegas, el tiempo apremia. Como nuestra delegada joven advirtió en la jornada de ayer, los retos del presente amenazan el cumplimiento de la Agenda 2030. Con la aprobación de estas directrices, estamos dando un gran salto hacia adelante en la lucha contra el hambre y sus devastaciones. El camino continúa hasta el fin de la pobreza, la erradicación definitiva del hambre y la eliminación de todas las formas de malnutrición. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Canada, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, all colleagues, or good afternoon as well. Canada would like to join others in recognizing and applauding the work of the CFS Secretariat and the extraordinary leadership and resilience of the chair of the open-ended working group, as well as the previous chair, on leading the negotiations for the voluntary guidelines on food systems for nutrition. I particularly appreciated personally the chair's tireless and pragmatic efforts to offer solutions based on what unites us. We have been actively engaged in supporting the development of these guidelines since the inception of the policy convergence process, and we are pleased to see a comprehensive and high-quality document driven by many valuable guiding principles endorsed today at CFS 47, one that can be usefully applied in a diversity of contexts. Nutrition and food policy are important issues for Canada domestically, as well as for our international assistance efforts. We are pleased that the process for developing these guidelines has provided an opportunity to build consensus for the first time within a multilateral forum on recommendations related to the complex linkages between healthy diets and sustainable food systems. We are supportive of approaches that support sustainable food systems and of dietary guidance that include sustainability considerations. And in this regard, we feel that it's propitious that we are adopting these guidelines on World Pulses Day. Pulses are a great example of how their properties benefit both sustainable food systems and healthy diets. And we thank the Ambassador of Argentina for the invitation to join the important celebration on Friday. We are also pleased that the guidelines have included consideration to strengthen the participation and inclusion of Indigenous peoples, including the preservation of Indigenous and traditional knowledge, and highlighted the importance of food safety, well-functioning food supply chain, evidence-based data-driven approaches, nutrition education, and advertising to children. We would also like to express recognition for the strong references to the gender dimension. And we are pleased to take this work forward in the next work stream on the CFS voluntary guidelines for gender equality and women's empowerment. And finally, recent projects have shown that the impact of COVID-19 could result in an additional 9.3 million wasted and 2.6 million stunted children by 2022. And given the essential role that good nutrition plays, it's important to support food system and nutrition outcomes in our COVID-19 response efforts. With the backdrop of the upcoming UN Food System Summit and the 2021 Nutrition for Growth Summit hosted by the government of Japan, the endorsement of these guidelines is an important step in the process towards achieving sustainable food systems and advancing progress towards achieving the global nutrition targets and the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. Now, I would like to give the floor to our Minister of Portugal. The Minister will speak on behalf of the European Union and its member state. Portugal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me say I'm honored to speak on behalf of the European Union and its 27 member states. With global changes on the rise, in particular hunger and all forms of malnutrition, climate change, poverty, and inequality, as well as environmental degradation and biodiversity loss, all of sustainable is paramount. They in achieving across all sustainable development goals, in particular, the utmost important zero hunger objective. to keep on track and address the additional challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, an urgent and collective response, context-based solution, and an holistic and inclusive to our food systems are all essential. If we are to fulfill and these sustainable development goals on and its key.
Mr. Chair.
Ministers, we lost your Minister. We lost your connections. Perhaps we will call you again for intervention, and also our technician will try to coordinate to assist. No, I think your sound is interrupted.
Okay.
Shall we try again after this? I will call other country first, and then we will coordinate with your team for your interventions. It's okay?
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much. I will call you back. Yeah. Now I give the floor to Russian Federation first, please. Russian Federation, please.
Уважаемый господин председатель, позвольте поблагодарить председателя переговорного процесса господина Ханса Хуговина за его усилия, нацеленные на выход на взаимоприемлемый текст добровольных руководящих принципов по продовольственным системам и питанию. Это был сложный процесс, но по итогам многодневных и многочасовых переговоров нам удалось прийти к хрупкому компромиссу. Рассчитываем, что документ будет сегодня утвержден консенсусом. Россия приветствует принятый за основу при разработке добровольных руководящих принципов комплексный межотраслевой подход, нацеленный на координацию мер в сфере сельского хозяйства, продовольственной политики и здравоохранения для обеспечения здорового питания. Отмечаем важное значение учета всех составляющих так называемого тройного бремени неполноценного питания, недоедания, дефицита микронутриентов, ожирения. Поддерживаем выработанные комитетом рекомендации, соответствующие решения Второй международной конференции по вопросам питания. В частности, это касается обеспечения безопасности и качества пищевых продуктов, снижения продовольственных потерь, борьбы с неинфекционными заболеваниями, связанными с неправильным питанием, образования в этой области и пропаганды здорового образа жизни, социальной защиты уязвимых слоев населения, уменьшения устойчивости к противомикробным препаратам. Россия приветствует направление данного документа в качестве вклада в итоги саммита ООН по продовольственным системам 2021 года и рассчитывает, что руководящие принципы займут достойное место среди других важных возможных межправительственных документов, подготавливаемых к этому важному мероприятию. В завершение позвольте еще раз поблагодарить всех участников переговорного процесса за их вовлеченность, проявленную гибкость в поиске компромиссных развязок и уважение к позициям стран-членов. И отдельная благодарность сотрудникам секретариата КВПБ. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you, Russian Federation. I will give the floor to Senegal, and then after that, we will try to connect to our Minister of Portugal. Senegal, please. Senegal, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, au nom du groupe régional Afrique, le Sénégal et le Nigeria font cette déclaration sur le point 5 de l'ordre du jour de la 47e session du CSA relatif à l'adoption des directives volontaires sur les systèmes alimentaires et la nutrition. Tout d'abord, nous saluons les efforts remarquables accomplis par le groupe de travail à composition non limitée au cours des 6 derniers mois, ainsi que le leadership d'abord de M. Khalid de l'Égypte, de Dr Liliane Ortega de la Suisse et de l'ambassadeur Hans Hugen qui les a succédés dans le rôle de président du groupe de travail. Nous les félicitons vivement, ainsi que vous-même, le secrétariat du CSA, le groupe des amis du président et tous les participants au processus d'élaboration des directives volontaires. Nous nous félicitons de l'approche participative et inclusive qui a présidé à l'élaboration de ces directives depuis le draft 0 jusqu'à l'adoption de ce projet final. À l'évidence, ces directives volontaires tombent à pic à un moment où la pandémie de COVID-19 a administré à l'humanité la preuve que les systèmes alimentaires actuels sont plus que fragiles et devraient être transformés en vue de leur résilience et de leur durabilité. Leur mise en œuvre devrait en effet considérablement contribuer à la réalisation de l'agenda 2030 et des autres engagements de la communauté internationale visant à ne laisser personne de côté. En perspective du sommet sur les systèmes alimentaires prévu en 2021, ces directives volontaires nous paraissent également être arrivées au bon moment car elles devraient renforcer la contribution du CSA et de toutes les agences basées à Rome à cet important sommet en termes notamment d'orientation politique propre à lancer le processus de transformation souhaité des systèmes alimentaires, processus qui devrait être très long parce que nous n'en sommes qu'au début. Tout en reconnaissant le caractère non contraignant, le groupe régional Afrique encourage toutes les parties prenantes du CSA à soutenir fortement et promouvoir à tous les niveaux la diffusion, l'utilisation et l'application de ces directives volontaires et les invite à cet égard à partager régulièrement leurs expériences et les leçons apprises au cours de leur mise en œuvre. Nous pensons en outre que les directives volontaires constituent un premier pas vers la réalisation effective du droit à une alimentation saine et durable pour tous. Ce pas ne suffit pas, ne suffit certainement pas. Il faudra en faire d'autres. Et à cet égard, le groupe africain recommande de poursuivre et de renforcer l'engagement et les travaux du CSA dans la formulation de recommandations visant à mieux assurer le droit à une alimentation saine et durable et renforcer la souveraineté alimentaire qui en est un préalable absolu. Il nous paraît, Monsieur le Président, il nous paraît également juste et utile de saisir ce moment pour souligner quelques-unes des inquiétudes qui sont les nôtres en tant que continent. Elles portent notamment sur le manque d'ambition manifeste de notre communauté, de la communauté que nous formons tous ensemble, sur la réduction des pesticides, un manque d'ambition manifeste sur le renforcement des chaînes d'approvisionnement locaux et des petits producteurs locaux, surtout dans les pays en développement. Sur le manque d'ambition manifeste sur l'agroécologie, sur la question de l'agroécologie. Sur le renoncement progressif au multilatéralisme. C'est très préoccupant et c'est très inquiétant. Sur le manque d'ambition manifeste sur le commerce international équitable auquel les pays en développement pourraient pleinement participer. Le manque d'ambition manifeste sur le rôle des États dans la gouvernance des droits humains des plus pauvres. Le manque d'ambition manifeste sur beaucoup de points importants pour l'Afrique et pour les pays en développement. Nous espérons que l'adoption de ces directives volontaires ne sera qu'un premier pas et ouvrira des perspectives pour plus d'efforts visant à assurer des systèmes alimentaires résilients et durables et un droit à une alimentation saine et durable. Avec ces commentaires, le groupe africain se félicite de l'approbation par la plénière des directives volontaires relatives aux systèmes alimentaires et à la nutrition. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Senegal, speaking on behalf of our African regional group. Now we try to connect to Portugal. I hope that ministers is here. We must apologize for this inconvenience of the poor connection. Now I would like to give the floor to Minister of Portugal, is speaking on behalf of the European Union and its member state. Ministers, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Yep, we can hear you. Yep, please.
Switch on the video, please.
Yeah, please. We can hear you clear.
It's okay now?
Yep, it's very, very good, very good. We can hear you clear and loud.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me say I'm honored to speak on behalf of the European Union and its 27 member states. With global changes on the rise, in particular hunger and all forms of malnutrition, climate change, poverty and equality, as well as environmental degradation and biodiversity loss, the role of sustainable and resilient food systems is paramount. They play a key role in achieving progress across all sustainable development goals, in particular, the utmost important zero hunger objective. To keep on track and address the additional challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, an urgent and collective response, context-based solution, and an holistic and inclusive approach to our food systems are all essential if we are to fulfill in 2030 agenda and its sustainable development goals on time. In these regards, we underline and reaffirm our full commitment to the work in the Committee on the World Food Security and its key roles in fostering and transformation towards sustainable food systems. With the voluntary guidelines on food system and nutrition, the Committee on the World Food Security has again justified the trust we placed in it and show the added value of an inclusive, multi-stakeholder process. We thank all parties involved in this process for their constructive approach, flexibility, and engagement. We extend our special thanks to the chair of the open-ended working group, Ambassador Given from the Netherlands. His skillful leadership and his tireless efforts have been critical for reaching an agreement of the voluntary guidelines. We would particularly highlight the progress achieved by the voluntary guidelines on the food system and nutrition on matters considered crucial by the EU and its member states for supporting public policies and concrete initiatives at all levels and for achieving sustainable and resilient food systems, has illustrated in the Farm to Fork strategy of the European Green Deal. Considering this, we also highlight the importance of ensuring that voluntary guidelines on the food system and nutrition is duly considered in the process of preparation for the United Nations Food System Summit and Pre-Summit. We pledge our commitment to promoting the uptake and implementation of the voluntary guidelines on the food system and nutrition, and all previous committee on the World Food Security products, as we call upon the Rome-based agencies of all other stakeholders, including the private sector and the civil society to the same. With these remarks, in EU and its 27 member states hereby endorse the voluntary guidelines on food system and nutrition. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Excellencies, for your remark, speaking on behalf of European Union and its member state. Now I would like to give the floor to CSM followed by PSM. Now I give the floor to civil society mechanism, please.
Buenos días, señor presidente. Muchas gracias por darnos la palabra al mecanismo de la sociedad civil y pueblos indígenas. Bueno, empezamos diciendo en este día gracias. Agradecemos en primer lugar a México por la intervención que ha compartido con nosotras y también a Suiza y a Senegal y a los grupos al grupo africano, porque nos parece que con sus intervenciones han evidenciado los puntos necesarios para el cambio real de los sistemas alimentarios y también lo lejos que estas directrices están de todos estos puntos, ¿no? También agradecemos a Estados Unidos su intervención porque también, sobre todo para quienes no han participado de este proceso, les permite ver el espíritu y la voluntad que tienen para que realmente los sistemas alimentarios sean transformados. Todo esto nos lleva a un momento que desde el MSC queremos compartir, que es que se nos hace muy difícil de creer que en el 2021 tengamos entre manos un texto en el que palabras como derecho al agua, sostenibilidad, límites del planeta, transformación, agroecología, mercados locales, dietas sanas y sostenibles. En este texto, estas palabras o han quedado fuera o han quedado prácticamente invisibilizadas. Por lo tanto, para nosotras, este texto carece bastante de la ambición que le presuponíamos en un inicio. Perdón. Y esto también pasa porque hace meses se decidió que el mandato de estas directrices estuviera condicionado por una cumbre a la que estamos dedicando mucho tiempo y que seguramente va a ser importante, pero que creemos no puede sustituir de ninguna manera a este espacio que entendemos como el más inclusivo para abordar los temas sobre seguridad alimentaria. En plena crisis en la que el planeta les habla cada vez más claro, nos habla a todas, muchas han decidido ignorarlo. En un momento en la que los pueblos reclamamos transformación, muchos han decidido no escucharnos. Se ha preferido preservar intereses a derechos y, en plena pandemia, este proceso, en lugar de adaptarse para el beneficio de los pueblos, se ha adaptado para el beneficio de otras. Entendemos nosotras este espacio, el CSA, que cuenta con una finalidad, que es responder a los desafíos que la seguridad alimentaria plantea hoy. Este proceso consideramos que no ha cumplido con esa finalidad, ni en el contenido ni en las formas. Hemos asistido a un proceso del todo irregular, con horas y horas de amigos del presidente, un espacio teóricamente informal en el que se ha pretendido que todo se resolviera y donde en la práctica se ha negociado la mayor parte del documento en condiciones no inclusivas. Hemos visto muy claramente cómo las palabras consenso y flexibilidad no eran utilizadas de igual manera para todas y la presión ha sido muy diferente para unas y para otras. Hemos asistido incluso a cómo ni siquiera el lenguaje del CSA ha sido aceptado por el propio CSA. Se ha buscado renegociar aquí lo que no les gustaba de otros acuerdos y hemos asistido incluso al intento de socavar los principios del multilateralismo y de los derechos humanos. A nivel de contenido, las palabras que he enumerado al inicio, ahí están muchas de las claves para nosotras y también muchas de nuestras líneas rojas. Lo saben y lo sabían, se lo hicimos saber. Lo que nos parece muy difícil de asumir hoy, siglo XXI, en plena pandemia, es que algunas no sean también las suyas. Este texto menciona en muchísimas ocasiones las evidencias, pero a la vez se ha negado a ver lo evidente, la necesidad de una transformación y de que otros modelos son no solo necesarios, sino imprescindibles. Los gobiernos han decidido elegir las partes de las evidencias que les daban la razón. Se han preocupado más de generar en cada párrafo de las directrices incertidumbre que realmente frases que fueran dirigentes. Han dominado los intereses de los países agroexportadores y del agronegocio corporativo. Y la verdad, como mecanismo, no sabemos qué es mejor creer, que protegen ciertos intereses, que son simplemente necios o ciegos, o que ustedes se ven inmunes a las consecuencias de las crisis globales. Todo este proceso ha llegado a ser imposible de creer hasta el día en el que se ha terminado de negociar. Apenas una semana antes de la plenaria, sin tiempo para consultas y sin tiempo de cumplir con una norma que creemos es básica para el Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria, la inclusividad. Como ya hemos dicho, esto ya no es un tema de a quién benefician o no los contenidos. Esto es una cuestión de garantizar que este espacio, el CSA, es lo que se supone que debe ser. Por tanto, para nosotras ha sido imposible, como ya anunciamos que sería, hacer un buen proceso inclusivo de consulta. No sabemos también cómo lo han hecho ustedes en tan poco tiempo. Hemos visto que hay algunos países que no lo han conseguido. Tal vez, en su caso, en el de algunas, esta decisión estaba en manos de menos manos, estaba en pocas manos, y eso lo puede hacer más fácil. Compartimos también una pregunta. ¿Realmente los países con menor ingreso y con más dependencia creen que es aceptable este documento? ¿Realmente es un paso adelante? Termino diciendo que desde el mecanismo llegamos muy decepcionadas a este momento porque realmente hemos puesto mucha energía en este proceso y nadie podrá negar nuestro compromiso. No podemos sumarnos a ese aplauso inicial y tan innovador que han sacado hoy para aprobar las directrices. Nuestra posición hoy es la decepción y las muchas reservas que tenemos, dado que nuestras principales prioridades han quedado excluidas. La inclusividad nunca ha sido una prioridad en este proceso y ello ha provocado que por falta de tiempo para un proceso inclusivo en nuestros sectores, hoy no tengamos la posibilidad de posicionarnos en la aprobación o en el rechazo de las directrices. De esta forma, también solicitamos que se haga constar en las notas de esta plenaria. Igualmente, cuando este mecanismo cuente con su respuesta, la compartiremos con todas ustedes y nos gustaría que estuviese de forma pública y accesible en la página del CSA. Para finalizar, simplemente les comparto que nuestros sectores están analizando y evaluando el texto, con todas las reservas que ya hemos señalado. También porque el contenido está bastante alejado del resultado que hubo en las consultas regionales. Ahora mismo estamos viendo en qué medida este texto aporta algo en el camino hacia sistemas alimentarios que realmente nos alimenten. Hoy vemos cómo algunos de ustedes pueden respaldar procesos bien problemáticos, con tantos fallos y con tantos vacíos. Y les pedimos que reflexionen sobre ello y que tomen en cuenta para esta reflexión las múltiples crisis que estamos enfrentando hoy, la gente que se está muriendo de hambre mientras estamos hablando ahora mismo aquí, y los derechos de las futuras generaciones y de la madre tierra. Muchas gracias y buenos días.
Thank you very much, civil society mechanism, for your statement and also concern raised to this plenary. Now I give the floor to private sector mechanism, PSM, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would also like to recognize and celebrate World Pulses Day. It is indeed a big day for all farmers around the world, including our pulse farmers here in Canada. On behalf of the private sector mechanism, we support the adoption of these voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. It is an important moment and the first major product of CFS in many years. While the process to arrive here has been long and difficult, we should appreciate the process that got us here. In particular, our thanks to Ambassador Hogeveen and to the entire CFS Secretariat for their tireless efforts. We have taxed you day and night with this discussion. We would also like to note the work of the former chairpersons of the Food Systems and Nutrition Workstream, Mr. Khaled Altawil and Dr. Liliane Ortega, whose efforts also contributed immensely to today's achievement. Thank you for your patience and fortitude. As said by the chair late in this negotiation, it is possible that everyone will be equally unhappy with the document. While it is true that there are parts that our group also does not exactly love, we do respect deeply the process that got us here. It is that very process that has led to many improvements to the text, and it is those positive achievements, notwithstanding the various challenges, which we would like to focus on today. Thanks to the contribution of all CFS multi-stakeholder members, the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition can be considered more balanced than its starting point, recognizing a scientific and evidence-based basis for its recommendations, stronger policy coherence, and a clear acknowledgement that all sectors and actors have an important role to play in achieving improved nutrition, including the private sector. It is now our job to turn to the uptake and implementation of these voluntary guidelines. Our PSM members have pledged to a wide range of actions toward improved nutrition and food systems. These actions span from commitments on marketing, product formulation and innovation, reducing food loss and waste, greenhouse gas emissions, and promoting sustainable packaging, supply chains, and farmer livelihoods. And now we are pleased to announce that the PSM has raised the resources of its members to conduct an information and training campaign. This will include 3 webinars in different time zones to help further the use of these guidelines. We welcome the engagement of CFS, member states, CSM, and all others in this process. At the same time, we will be highlighting this product in the discussions for the Food System Summit and other fora to shine a spotlight on the good work of CFS. Mr. Chairman, it has been a long and arduous road, but we have arrived and we stand ready to get to the real work of improving food systems and nutrition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, PSM, which actually, after listening to our stakeholders, PSM and also CSM, they are very important as a part of the stakeholders of the CFS, and also appreciate for their support, and also other stakeholders as well. Thank you for being with us today. Now I give the floor to Argentina, followed by Norway, please.
Gracias, presidente. Quisiera, ante todo, agradecer y reconocer los esfuerzos y la paciencia del embajador Hans Hoogeveen para lograr la culminación de estas negociaciones, y en particular el trabajo también de Emilio Colonelli y de la Secretaría. Permítanme, antes de hacer mis comentarios sustanciales, decir que no expresé mi aprobación por aclamación al inicio, porque recibimos la versión final en español el día sábado y la hemos enviado a Capital y estamos esperando algunas respuestas de algunas cuestiones técnicas, aunque, repito, en principio acompañamos, pero necesitamos de algunas horas más por la diferencia horaria para poder dar la respuesta como corresponde y de manera formal, presidente. Por eso quiero ir directamente a los puntos sustanciales. Este documento es válido y necesario tanto en materia de recomendación de buenas prácticas como parte de los insumos para la cumbre de sistemas alimentarios. Las negociaciones fueron intensas y francas. Buscábamos marcos de referencia dentro de los cuales funcionan los sistemas alimentarios, con una visión amplia, plural, que considere diversas realidades, contextos, capacidades y prioridades nacionales. El objetivo que todos tenemos es mejorar y fortalecer nuestros esquemas de producción de alimentos. Ha quedado claro en nuestras discusiones que no existe un modelo único para abordar estos procesos, que requieren un equilibrio de las 3 dimensiones del desarrollo sostenible de la Agenda 2030, económica, social y medioambiental. Como ya lo hemos señalado, presidente, para abordar el análisis de los sistemas alimentarios es imprescindible partir de esquemas conceptuales y terminologías técnicas internacionalmente acordadas por los Estados. A partir de allí, será más fácil su eventual implementación por parte de los Estados, la comprensión de su contenido por los usuarios y el establecimiento de bases sólidas para debates en la cumbre de sistemas alimentarios. Resaltamos el reconocimiento que hace el documento al rol esencial que cumplen las cadenas medianas y largas de abastecimiento y el comercio local, regional e internacional de alimentos, de manera transparente, equitativa y sin barreras artificiales. Todo ello para facilitar el acceso a canastas de productos variados, inocuos y a precios accesibles. En particular, el comercio internacional ha demostrado ser fundamental para la seguridad alimentaria en el contexto del COVID-19. Para terminar, presidente, otro punto clave que queremos resaltar es el rol principal que tienen las mujeres rurales e indígenas, los jóvenes y los campesinos. Necesitamos que tengan más oportunidades, empoderamiento, autonomía y poder decisorio en el marco de los sistemas alimentarios. Queremos resaltar una cuestión clave para el G77 más China, el principio de responsabilidades comunes pero diferenciadas de la Declaración de Río, los mecanismos de cooperación sur-sur y el espíritu de la Agenda 2030. Porque si no, presidente, sin este principio, las directrices no serán realistas, no serán aplicables. Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Agent, for your statement and support. Now I give the floor to Norway, followed by Nigeria, please.
Thank you, Chair. The number of food insecure and malnourished is increasing globally, and the world is not on track to meet the SDG number 2. A systemic cross-sectoral approach is needed to put us back on track. A key global challenge today is to ensure that all people have access to sufficient, safe, and healthy food that is sustainable produced. The upcoming UN Food Systems Summit makes the launch of voluntary guidelines of food systems and nutrition timely to address these needs. Norway acknowledges the tremendous amount of work and effort that has been put down in the negotiations of the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition, both from the CFS Secretariat and the members of the CFS. In our view, bringing together different disciplines under the food system and nutrition approach has been a valuable but also a difficult task. Therefore, the work would have benefited from taking the most recent agreed language from the respective disciplines as a point of departure. We should remind ourselves that these guidelines refer to related guidance contained in other policy products developed by CFS as well as by other institutions, and that the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition are intended to build upon and complement the work and mandate of other international bodies. Moreover, we wish to emphasize that the work of the CFS must uphold the right to adequate food as a key guiding principle in support of food security and nutrition. Unfortunately, both the process and in the final version of the voluntary guidelines on food system and nutrition, there has been no serious reflection of a human rights perspective. As a result, the few references to the right to food do not provide the guidance we would have liked for a human rights-based approach to the food system summit process. In parallel, our scientific experts have in the 15th HLPE report provided us with valuable insights on the evolving understanding of food security, emphasizing the need to put the right to adequate food in the forefront. The report clearly demonstrates that availability is only one component of the broader picture of why hunger and malnutrition persist, and that a person's ability to access enough and healthy food is equally important. The voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition provide a first step to an integrated and systemic approach to food security and nutrition. CFS is the foremost inclusive international and intergovernmental platform for all stakeholders to work together to ensure food security and nutrition for all. In this perspective, the role and involvement of the CSM and the PSM is one of CFS' strongest assets and strengthens the authority of the CFS products. We regret that CSM did not participate in the final stretch of the negotiations and is not in a position to endorse the final outcome. Nevertheless, Norway supports the uptake of the voluntary guidelines. We encourage all CFS stakeholders to support and promote the guidelines at all levels within their constituencies and in collaboration with other relevant initiatives and platforms, the dissemination, use and application of the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Norway. And now I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Spain, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Let me start by thanking everyone that has been part of this process in the past 5 years. And let me also thank people who have taken the floor before me, because some of the pros and cons of today's endorsement, partial as it may be, because some nations are still expecting the official nod to endorse. But for the majority of countries that have endorsed, I think it's a step forward. A step forward because 5 years is a long time. And not only idling 5 years, but very active 5 years with all the stakeholders of CFS. We've come to this point, and it's a point of reality. And all the blames cannot be put on us or on CFS. We did not set the agenda for the food summit. We did not choose the time. We got it as an instruction from the Secretary General, and we started running with it. So I want to say this, that their colleagues and all stakeholders of CFS, from the bottom of my heart, I think we should just know that we're a family, and in a family, there's always going to be stepping on each other's toes. But because of the love and the target of the billions of people out there that are hungry, that are hardworking, and they're under the sun day and night, and in fact, under the cold at times, we need to forget about our shortcomings. We need to work towards galvanizing our strength, our wisdom. If you can calculate the amount of wisdom in this room now, across the world, is tremendous. And we cannot afford to waste it because of little hitches, shortcomings here and there. As a former chair of CFS, I've spent a considerable amount of my life on CFS matters, and it's very close to my heart. I know what it means when you are negotiating. You have sleepless nights, and we may not appreciate the value of our wives in giving us the strength and the courage to go on, even when it looks so dark. And I think these are the things we should bring in. For the civil society, you've made your point. But can we use these shortcomings as a stepping stone to higher grounds? Can we encourage the countries and all those out there that may be neglected to give them hope? We cannot, because we are like firewoods in a burning stove. If we begin to remove the firewood because one is too smoky, the other one is not igniting well, the fire will die and we'll not be able to cook our food. For the PSN, thank you for the practical suggestion of making the outcome of the food summit workable at country levels by advocacy and teaching us how to disseminate the information. I want to also thank the Swiss, the Brazilian, the Russian, and the Dominican Republic, amongst others, for their positive approach to this problem. Let's go to the food summit with a raw materials that is not perfect. Let's know that, yes, rights are not well emphasized, the environment is not respected. You know what? Dear colleagues, we cannot fight nature and we cannot fight the environment. It will fight us back. And that is what COVID is telling us. A word is sufficient for the wise. Before I stop, let me thank everybody that has also worked very hard on the pulses. I've said it a number of times. I was brought up on pulses, eating it every day of my life. And I can see the effect. If we are able to shift our taste, our appetite to eating more pulses, and then we go to the cultural aspect, how to prepare it, we will save our green, our carbon footprint and the gas emission that producing protein through animal source is giving us. Once again, I think, dear colleagues, dear friends, we have to work together with this imperfect document. And I thank Senegal for presenting the African position. Thank you, Chair. Over and out.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nigeria Ambassador Yaya, for your wisdom and also suggestion that you give to us. And also, you are the one who will lead us to the next work stream policy recommendation on agroecological and other innovative approach. We know that during the process of the voluntary guideline, we spend days and nights together with others, colleagues, with others, stakeholders, together with our Ambassador Hukavin. And that's why after this, in March, we will start the next challenging work on policy recommendation on agroecological. And we are on your hand. And we will provide full support and also the commitment for your help and leading us to the goal. Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Spain.
Yeah, Chair, please pardon me.
Please.
I hate to interrupt you.
Please.
But let me make this correction.
Please.
I am in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your help and support, my dear friend. Now I give the floor to Spain and France, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. España se alinea con la intervención realizada por la ministra de Portugal en nombre de la Unión Europea y sus Estados miembros y damos la bienvenida a la aprobación de las directrices voluntarias para los sistemas alimentarios y la nutrición. La aprobación de estas directrices es un elemento clave de cara a la cumbre de sistemas alimentarios que apoyamos y un paso hacia la transformación a favor de sistemas alimentarios más sostenibles. Sin embargo, sí quiero hacer un apunte. El CSA tiene un indudable valor como plataforma inclusiva, con representación efectiva de todos los actores, para lo cual es fundamental, entre todos, buscar consensos para poder contar con todos los miembros en la mesa de negociaciones, incluyendo el mecanismo de la sociedad civil. Quisiéramos, a su vez, también añadir algunos aspectos que nos parecen fundamentales y que son esenciales seguir trabajando para poder contar con sistemas alimentarios sostenibles y resilientes. En primer lugar, todas las acciones dirigidas hacia esa transformación requiere priorizar y poner en el centro el derecho a una alimentación adecuada, que es clave no solo para alcanzar el ODS 2, sino para alcanzar gran parte de la Agenda 2030, sino toda ella. Este enfoque requiere poner en el centro la perspectiva y las necesidades de las personas, aquellas personas que se encuentran en situación de mayor vulnerabilidad. Pequeños agricultores, indígenas, mujeres, jóvenes. También apoyamos la promoción de políticas que promuevan de forma específica las dietas saludables, nutritivas y sostenibles, esenciales para abordar la incidencia de enfermedades relacionadas con la dieta, como la malnutrición o la obesidad. A su vez, debemos seguir avanzando en la implementación de prácticas más sostenibles, como es la agroecología o el apoyo también a la agricultura familiar. Este tipo de prácticas ayudan a abordar problemáticas grandes que estamos afrontando hoy en día, como son el cambio climático o la degradación de los ecosistemas. También España ha estado en todo momento a favor de impulsar enfoques territoriales. Es fundamental fortalecer los mercados territoriales, los canales cortos y la producción local. Existen muchos sistemas agroalimentarios, pero es necesario reforzar estos que en algunas ocasiones están inexistentes. El enfoque territorial permite favorecer la construcción de un mundo rural vivo, un tejido sociocultural y económico en torno a la actividad agraria y el medio rural, y un espacio de interacción social, cultural, económica y medioambiental. Debemos buscar un nuevo contrato social rural urbano. Tal y como señala el informe que acaba de presentar el grupo de alto nivel de expertos, elaborar una descripción global de cara al 2030, los mercados territoriales con un enfoque sostenible son a menudo mucho más remunerativos para los pequeños productores, más inclusivos y tienen incorporados sistemas de gobernanza que apoyan a los productores. Para finalizar, este mismo informe del grupo de expertos actualiza el concepto de seguridad alimentaria, añadiendo a las 4 dimensiones ya reconocidas de la seguridad alimentaria, 2 dimensiones más, el arbitrio y la sostenibilidad. Este cambio resulta un punto de inflexión esencial para seguir impulsando la transformación de los sistemas alimentarios al poner en el centro el empoderamiento y la capacidad de las personas de adoptar medidas que contribuyan a mejorar su propio bienestar. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to France and then Hungary, please.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. La France s'aligne sur la déclaration prononcée par le Portugal au nom de l'Union européenne et de ses 27 États membres. Nous saluons les efforts de toutes les parties prenantes pour parvenir à ce consensus sous la direction successive de nos collègues Khalid El Tawil et Liliane Ortega et enfin de l'ambassadeur Hans Hugeveen, que nous remercions chaleureusement pour leur engagement dans ce travail collectif. Nous remercions également l'ensemble des négociateurs et l'équipe du secrétariat du CSA. La France a soutenu ce processus, y compris financièrement pour son interprétation. Bien sûr, chacun peut estimer que le texte aurait pu être plus ambitieux sur certains points. Par exemple, sur la transformation des systèmes alimentaires, transformation nécessaire, ou sur l'agroécologie, ou bien différents. Mais c'est un réel succès collectif que d'avoir pu s'accorder sur un sujet aussi vaste et important. C'est aussi un succès pour le Comité de la sécurité alimentaire mondiale, plateforme de dialogue multipartite et inclusive, qui fait une nouvelle fois la preuve de sa capacité à élaborer des recommandations pertinentes pour éclairer l'élaboration et la mise en œuvre de politiques efficaces pour rendre les systèmes alimentaires durables et résilients. C'est une première étape. La France est convaincue que ces directives, que tous les acteurs doivent maintenant mettre en œuvre, chacun à leur niveau, seront une contribution essentielle pour le sommet des Nations Unies pour les systèmes alimentaires. Enfin, je profite de cette journée internationale des légumineuses pour remercier l'Argentine et notamment l'ambassadeur Carlos Chirniak pour l'organisation vendredi de l'événement de haut niveau consacré à cette journée. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Yep. Thank you, France, for your contribution and support during the process. We really appreciate. Now I give the floor to Hungary, please. Hungary, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased to inform you that we fully align ourselves with the statement delivered on behalf of the EU and its 27 member states, and I wish to make some additional comments. Let me start with a personal note. 36 years ago, I had the opportunity to attend CFS 10 in April 1985. Since then, my whole career has been strongly linked to the issues related to food security. I was involved in the elaboration and approval of the Right to Food guidelines in 2004, closely followed the CFS reform process and policy convergence leading to the approval of VGGT, RAI, and many policy recommendations. I have become a passionate advocate of CFS and its relevant policy products, trying always to push for promoting the uptake and implementation of these policy products. This is why it is my great pleasure to be present here today and to be able to personally endorse the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. Although I agree with France, Senegal, and some others that it could have been more ambitious sometimes. I express our appreciation for the participants of the open-ended working group members for their constructive dialogues and the chairs, Khaled Al-Tawel.
Yeah, please.
Khaled Al-Tawel from Egypt, Liliana Ortega from Switzerland, and Hans Hogewein from the Netherlands for facilitating this process, assisted by the excellent CFS Secretariat. Mr. Chair, I think we can all agree that properly addressing hunger and all forms of malnutrition requires the transformation of food systems, making them more sustainable. The question is on what basis? Evidence and neutral science can offer the solution. An overall assessment of all food systems is indispensable, including assessment of their positive and negative externalities, particularly the hidden costs. These hidden costs are enormous and can be quantified, as we could see in the latest SOFI 2020 report. This true cost accounting can and should be the basis for redirecting subsidies to promote sustainable solutions, including incentives for the production and consumption of pulses, as you, Mr. Chair, highlighted in your introductory remarks this morning. I appreciate your comments also as chair of the International Steering Committee of the International Year of Pulses in 2016 and the World Pulses Day last year. Great thanks to Ambassador of Argentina of the current chair for the invitation for Friday. I will definitely attend. Mr. Chair, as the SOFI 2020 report states, for many people, healthy diets are not available or affordable. We should make it clear, affordability does not simply mean cheap food. We wish to remind all of us that economic dimension of sustainability is important, but it is strongly linked to the subsidies and policy incentives provided by governments. If true cost accounting and true costs of food are calculated, the fresh, nutritious, locally produced food would be competitive. Hungary remains committed to implementing these guidelines, including reducing food waste and food loss, or targeted national programs draw attention of people and food chain actors to the importance of preventing food waste. we would be happy to share details of our programs. Finally, I wish to draw attention to the fact that the UN Food Systems Summit represents a momentum and a huge opportunity to develop sustainable and resilient food systems. We wish to reiterate our encouragement to the Food Systems Summit Secretariat and in particular the Science Group, as I have done it in my capacity as member of the Food Systems Summit Advisory Committee, to better rely on the widely recognized expertise of HLPE and the voluntary guidelines and policy recommendations of the CFS. This would ensure that the just endorsed CFS voluntary guidelines feed in the process of preparations and follow-up actions in the UN Food Systems Summit. Dear friends and colleagues, this CFS 47 is my last session. I will retire on the 1st of April. I wish you all the best in your future work, and I'm confident that you will make sure CFS will help make our world better and more sustainable. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, ambassadors, for your interventions and also for your commitment to the work of the CFS since CFS 10 that you attended by yourself, and also a lot of insight information that you provided to us. Thank you, and also you are one of our champion as always. Thank you. Now I give the floor to, now I try to back to the list of CFS stakeholders and also other participants as well. Now I would like to give the floor to UN OCHA. I think it's, if I understand is correct.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I'm taking the floor on behalf of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights to express, yes. Yeah, no worries. To express our appreciation for the efforts made in drafting and negotiating the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. We take this opportunity to share as well our concerns on the inadequate reflection of human rights standards and principles in the text of the guidelines, and on the process and the online modalities of the negotiations. They might have failed to include properly the views and perspective of civil society. On the content, we would like to draw your attention on the general lack of ambition of the guidelines. They compare to other CFS instruments, such as the Framework for Action for Food Security and Nutrition in Protracted Crisis. Sorry?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Shied away from operationalizing states' human rights obligations in actual policy guidelines in the area of food security, nutrition, and health. Firstly, the lack of reference to the right to water and to its interdependence with the right to food is a worrying gap. The right to water entails sustainable access to water resources for agriculture to realize the right to adequate food, and calls upon states to prioritize disadvantaged and marginalized farmers. Voluntary guidelines that ignore this dimension risk being irrelevant in many contexts. The guidelines should have prioritized measures to ensure small-scale farmers and fishers, especially women, have financial support, access to credit, land, seeds, natural resources, and technology to ensure their livelihood and shift towards sustainable farming that deliver fresh and local produce. This shift in food system is crucial for nutrition, which is an essential component of both the right to food and the right to health. The guidelines should have promoted gender equality more vigorously and throughout the text. In particular, the guidelines should have called for removing all discriminatory provisions in national laws to ensure women's equal access to productive resources, equality in family relations, freedom from violence, and their autonomy on body and health. Lastly, we regret that the guidelines are silent on the rights of LGBTI and other non-binary persons. Data suggests the nutrition outcomes are worse for people belonging to racial and ethnic minorities, and the guidelines fail to promote measures that could contribute to dismantle structural discrimination against specific groups, such as people of African descent and indigenous peoples. The guidelines should have acknowledged and promoted the responsibilities of the states in regulating business activities to promote the availability and accessibility of healthy diets, including through fiscal incentives and disincentives. In this context, the guidelines could have stressed the responsibility of the private sector to do no harm and respect human rights, including the right to food and the right to health of the population at large, and of children in particular. Finally, CFS is a model and an inspiration for other UN forums for its inclusivity and for its participatory processes. However, in the negotiations of the guidelines, the online modalities and the exceptional circumstances in which we are living led to a less than optimal result. Civil society, in a powerful speech during the negotiation, expressed their disappointment at the process and content of the guidelines, detailing how they felt unheard in shaping a policy document that has a direct impact on their lives. The negotiations proceeded without really addressing these concerns. In light of these shortcomings, OHCHR would have preferred the negotiations to continue for hopefully in-person rounds during the summer to make sure civil society could exercise their right to participation, and this would have surely contributing at making the guidelines more in line with human rights norms and principles. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Italy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally align myself with the statement of the, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I totally align myself with the statement of the European Union, and I would like to share some additional national comments. First of all, I add my warm thanks to Ambassador Hogeven, Mrs. Ortega, and Mr. Etawil. The voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition we are adopting today are the result of a long work that started 4 years ago and culminated in the intense negotiations of the last weeks. This heavy process describes the importance that the voluntary guidelines have for all the CFS members and stakeholders. CFS reaffirmed its centrality for food security and nutrition, and the voluntary guidelines can contribute meaningfully to the transformation towards more sustainable food systems. My country is fully committed to make the best use of the guidelines, which result from the balance between multiple visions and positions. All the members, including my country, showed a flexible and constructive approach for reaching consensus on such a critical document for all. We agree with Ambassador O'Geven that we should all be proud because such an important result could be achieved only by compromising on several issues. When it comes to recommended policies and tools to provide education and information on healthy diets, Italy's position supports the importance to promote informative science and evidence-based nutrition labeling, allowing consumers to obtain correct information on food. Thank you, Chair. Over.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Italy, for your intervention. Regarding the intervention just made by United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioners, I'm not sure that whether you're speaking on whose behalf, and also is this statement is approved by the members of the UN United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioners. Yeah. It just only to take note to make sure that it's it.
Yes, it is.
Okay, yep, thank you. Now I give the floor to UK, please.
Good afternoon, Chair, CFS members, and our friends, the interpreters. The UK is very pleased that members have reached agreement on the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. It is indeed a major milestone the CFS has reached in bringing member states together to collectively agree on the importance of sustainable food systems and healthy diets. Transforming food systems is crucial for tackling malnutrition. Can I proceed,
yes,
Chair?
Please, yeah.
It is indeed a major milestone for the CFS that the CFS has reached in bringing member states together to collectively agree on the importance of sustainable food systems and healthy diets. Transforming food systems is crucial for tackling malnutrition, building resilience, meeting our climate and environmental objectives, reducing poverty, and achieving long-term prosperity. It is an urgent yet complex undertaking, and the negotiations and compromise reached reflect those complexities. We would like to thank and congratulate the chair of the open-ended working group, Ambassador Hans Wilgeveen, for his leadership throughout the many months of negotiations in bringing often different views and positions together and forging a consensus. We'd like to thank the whole CFS for all their work and wish the CFS and member states great success in taking much needed action to move towards more sustainable food systems and healthy diets in the spirit of the voluntary guidelines. Finally, we'd also like to wish the Ambassador of Argentina and the team all the very best for Friday's World Pulses Day celebrations. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Duque. Now I give the floor to our Sun Movement, followed by Australia, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Let me congratulate everyone who is involved in this process, participants, the chairs, the different chairs, the Secretariat, and everyone who has contributed to the voluntary guideline on food systems for nutrition wholeheartedly. It is very timely that the voluntary guidelines are seeing the light and can be endorsed and sent out to the world, because they were endorsed this morning, but we still hear some remarks. But I'm quite sure that by the end of the day, the voluntary guidelines are there to be used and to inform countries to make their commitments for the Food Systems Summit, but also for the Nutrition for Growth Summit that will be hosted by the government of Japan. These guidelines will be important to inform and start and bring together the actors at country level for the food systems dialogues, because the commitments that will be made, hopefully during the Food Systems Summit in September, and maybe already during the summit in July in Rome, will be country-owned and country-based and coming from where a country is. And let me here give voice to our deep wish that these voluntary guidelines are there to guide and inform, and not to replace other agreements and codes that are already there. Let me mention two examples. Some parts of the guidelines are weaker than the agreement between countries in the International Conference on Nutrition, ICN2, where the same partners came together to agree on healthy diets and the importance of nutrition. The second point is the code of conduct for breast milk substitute marketing. We don't want to see that this code is weakened in its impact, and at the contrary, we would like to encourage those companies who are involved in this to be strong and show real leadership in promoting more breastfeeding and support lactating women, but also adolescent girls. They can do a lot of good, but let's not weaken what is already out there. Finally, the Sun Movement stands ready with its 62 member countries and 4 Indian states to take the voluntary guidelines to our many members and stakeholders at country level to make sure that the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition will be used for nutrition, will be used to inform the start of the country food systems dialogues. While at the same time, we want to stand shoulder to shoulder with all CFS participants to make sure that from the very beginning, all stakeholders are at the table from farmers, smallholder family farmers, but also making sure that small and medium-sized enterprises are there, that women and youth have a place, but also that the civil society is well represented at the table, that they can all have their say and that they are all part and parcel of creating a food system that is healthy for people, but also healthy and supportive for our planet, making sure that nobody is left behind. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, participants. You still have a great place in my heart. And I would just like to say that I emphasize with the words that were mentioned, the words that were said by my predecessor, Ambassador Yaya. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for your support, and also I think it's very nice to see the former CFS chairs on the same screen now, Ambassador Yaya and also Gerda. Thank you very much for your great support. Now I give the floor to Australia, followed by Kuwait, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Australia welcomes the completion of the negotiations on the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition, and we extend our deep admiration and respect for the most recent chair of the open-ended working group, Ambassador Hans Hugoven, for his exceptional stamina and commitment to consensus, together with the outstanding work of the CFS Secretariat team. We recognise the significant potential these non-binding and voluntary guidelines offer. Sorry, can I just check if you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you. I heard an echo. The potential they offer as a tool for shaping food systems that are sustainable and nutrition sensitive in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially SDG 2, in the next 9 years. No country is exempt from the challenge of providing adequate and better nutrition to its people. While Australia does not suffer the double burden of malnutrition, overweight and obesity is a major public health concern and affects 2/3 of our adult population. We respectfully offer 3 reflections on the development of these guidelines that may be useful in consideration of future CFS policy processes. The time commitment required to negotiate a document covering such a broad range of topics puts a particular strain and disadvantage on small delegations and stakeholder groups. While we appreciate the ambition and timeliness of these guidelines, we see increased feasibility in negotiating more targeted topics in the future. This could include breaking down the document into thematic sections. Further, and as mentioned during Australia's intervention on the MyPower yesterday, we highlight the value of dedicated attention to a single work stream at a time. Given the nature of the negotiation process, we noted delegations were not always able to effectively use their experts to make positive contributions to the text. For example, we noticed experts present in the last round of negotiations that were unfortunately unable to make much impact on an already heavily negotiated document. In future, we recommend the Secretariat proactively seek to engage early and targeted expert participation to ensure the process is not unnecessarily influenced by political agendas. This is particularly important in the early to mid stages of negotiation. And finally, there is a need for all members and stakeholders to be mindful of the diversity in national circumstances and not to try insert their preferred approach into every paragraph or section of a document, which by design must be adaptable to national contexts for successful implementation and uptake. With these comments, Australia endorses the guidelines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Australia, for your support and endorsement. And I give the floor to Kuwait, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس لإعطائي فرصة. أيضا أود أن أشكر جميع القائمين حقيقة على الوثيقة المهمة، وهي الخطوط التوجيهية الطوعية للنظم الغذائية، وخصوصا نشكر سعادة السفير هانز على جهوده الكبيرة في الخروج بهذه الوثيقة المهمة التي سوف تعطينا الدافع لانعقاد القمة في نهاية هذه السنة. نحن ندعم طبعا إيجاد نظم غذائية تتناسب مع الأغذية المحلية والمتوفرة، وعند إيجاد بدائل لهذه الأغذية يجب أن نأخذ بالاعتبار العادات والثقافات لبلداننا وشعوبنا، وعدم السعي لإدخال أغذية لا تتناسب مع هذه الثقافات وأيضا مع الوضع الاقتصادي المحلي لبلداننا، وبالأخص يجب أن يكون هناك احترام للحق بالغذاء كما ذكر العديد من المشاركين. ذكر أيضا من قبل المشاركين النظر للظروف الغذائية الوطنية، الأغذية المحلية، سهولة توفر الأغذية، تطوير استغلال هذه الأغذية، وكيفية الاتجاه إلى نظم تحويلية غذائية، حد من الفاقد والمقدر. هذه كلها بحاجة إلى إيجاد تكنولوجيا أو توفر تكنولوجيا وتوفر معلومات لهذه الدول. يجب أن تكون هذه التكنولوجيا والمعلومات تقدم من قبل المنظمات الدولية لسهولة الحصول عليها من قبل الدول النامية، ولا يكون هناك استغلال لها من قبل الدول الأخرى. كما رأينا هناك مخاوف من كثير من آلية المجتمع المدني خصوصا بهذا الخصوص، وهو كيفية توفر هذه المعلومات والتكنولوجيا والبيانات للدول النامية والفقيرة. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Yep, thank you very much, Kuwait, for your statement. Thank you. Now I give the floor to FAO and then UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. FAO, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have the pleasure and honor to deliver this message on behalf of the IPPC Secretariat. We would like to congratulate the Committee on World Food Security in delivering, as promised, the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. This important policy product is the latest addition to a series of highly effective documents that the CFS and the high-level panel of experts have delivered over the years. Our gratitude, of course, goes to His Excellency Hans Hoogeveen for his leadership, as well as to the previous chairs, Mr. Khaled Al-Tawil and Dr. Lilian Ortega. All the CFS members, the Secretariat for their availability and hard work, especially in receiving our written contributions from the IPPC community. Plants constitute the basis for life on the planet, and agricultural trade forms an essential part of food systems and international supply chains. Mr. Chair, the inclusion of the IPPC and its international standards for phytosanitary measures as a possible reference for harmonized applications seems a very appropriate solution to some of the concerns expressed by CFS member states in the past days. In fact, Mr. Chairs, ISPMs, our standards, facilitates trade while making it safe, preventing the introduction of plant pests and diseases in new areas of the world, usually with devastating effects. We take this occasion to promote additional cooperation, especially in view of the coming 15th session of the Commission on Phytosanitary Measures, where the IPPC commodity standard is going to be discussed and potentially adopted. The commodity standard will mark an important milestone for the IPPC community, and we look forward to increase the collaboration on such topics with the CFS in the future. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, we would like to note with appreciation that plants and their health are included in several paragraphs of the voluntary guidelines, particularly in relations to antimicrobial resistance and to the One Health approach, as well as in building resilience against climate change, amongst others. Excellencies, as it was expressed previously, 2020 was also the International Year of Plant Health, and we at the IPPC Secretariat are glad to see that some of its key messages are reflected in this historic CFS products. which we are sure will find broad application globally, regionally, nationally, and locally. With this, we thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations again to you all for this excellent dream coming true.
Thank you, FAO and IPPC, for your statement. Now I give the floor to UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I take this opportunity to congratulate this committee for the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. The Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues welcomes that the guidelines recognize Indigenous peoples as relevant stakeholders of food systems. They recognize Indigenous peoples' food systems and traditional knowledge, encouraging governments to promote the preservation of our knowledge and food systems. We highlight that these voluntary guidelines call governments to respect and recognize the legitimate customary tenure systems of Indigenous peoples and their collective practices. The guidelines call governments and stakeholders to respect Indigenous peoples' right to free, prior, and informed consent, and to adequately protect Indigenous peoples' knowledge and the ancestral customs generate and produce food sustainability. This recognition is extremely important. We Indigenous peoples are custodians of 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. While other food and productive systems have decimated biodiversity across the globe, through our food systems and territorial management, we have preserved natural resources in our territories and lands. Yet we generated foods and fed our communities. Unfortunately, the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition cannot be considered complete. These guidelines do not specify the fact that Indigenous people's food systems require a set of specific policies and legislation that protect and consider biocentrism, food generation, and territorial management at the same level of relevance to the market linkages and intensive production. Also, specific policies and legislation that promote interculturality are needed, as well as policies and legislation on territorial management that goes beyond landscape and includes Indigenous people's perspectives in the regulation of protected natural areas that overlap with Indigenous people's territories. Natural protected areas whose biodiversity was preserved through the very territorial management and food system practices that we call to preserve and enhance through specific policies and legislation that we would like to see included in documents such as these guidelines. This is not happening, and we see more and more protected areas created around the world at the expense of Indigenous people's lands, livelihoods, and territories. This is a fundamental contradiction. The preservation of Indigenous people's food system needs governments, international agencies, and academia to promote dedicated research on Indigenous people's food systems, favoring new metrics and indicators on nutrition, biodiversity, and food security. And we also need Indigenous knowledge-based decision-making. So Indigenous peoples, we are ready to and willing to support this important endeavor. And we do look forward that these guidelines are being transformed into concrete actions that are good for Indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I see CSM raised hand, but anyway, I would like to ask you to address to the plenary in the afternoon, because I would like to get Ambassador Hukafin, Chair of Open-Ended Working Group, to respond to the plenary, because now it's almost 12:30, then interpretation service will end soon. Now I give the floor to Ambassador Hukafin, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Plenary of CFS, for the endorsement of the voluntary guidelines. And indeed, it is an historic moment for CFS with the endorsement of these voluntary guidelines. And what we see, of course, with the remarks this morning is that it is not a perfect document. It clearly reflects the compromise based on which we could find consensus. But it is important that we reached a consensus, because I think that's the reality, but the success of the United Nations. And we have to preserve, I think, the integrity of the United Nations, because only then, as nations, as stakeholders, we can find a way forward to meet the most important challenge of our world nowadays, and that is indeed trying to achieve food security. And I think with the endorsement of the voluntary guidelines, we have set an historic step, but only a first step, because it's the first step towards the real implementation of the voluntary guidelines at the national level, taking into account the differences in the national situations, but hopefully also with a multi-stakeholder approach for the implementation. And let's set now aside our differences. Some of you would have liked to have a more ambitious document. Some others would have liked to see a less ambitious document. I think we have strived what we needed to strive within the United Nations. That's a compromise for the better of all of us. And let's unite now to the implementation. Let's go to the summit, our next step. Let's go to the summit to show them what we have achieved, show them, I would say, the deliverables we can achieve with the implementation of the voluntary guidelines. But let's make sure that at the highest level of our governments, of our organizations, is a clear commitment for the implementation. Not only a commitment of the implementation, but also providing the means for the implementation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Thank you very much, Ambassador Hoekeveen, for your remark to respond to our members and also stakeholders. And also now we come to the end of the morning sessions. As we are listening to all of you this morning, we know that in reality, no solution fit all sides. And we know that in the real world, no policies and guidelines is 100% perfect. There is pro and con. And that's why once we have endorsed this voluntary guideline on food system and nutrition, today is our historical moment. But we need further step and we need further commitment to bring the voluntary guideline into implementation at the country level, at the local level. And that's why we need you to help us to bring the right balance, because now it's the same as when we are cooking our food and cuisine at home. We need a right recipe, we need the right ingredients, and we also need the right level of heat. And you are the one who are the chef master, who can bring everything, resource, commitment, experience with the voluntary guideline to bring it into action at the local and at the country level. And also we need to bring all actors together on the table. And that's why we need to count on you. And that's why you are our champion to bring the voluntary guideline to create impact at the national level. And for this morning, now we end our morning session. And in the afternoon is very important because we will continue our discussion on further implementation and uptake of the voluntary guideline on food system at the country level. And we will start the meeting in the afternoon at 2:30. During the lunchtime, as usual, we have 3 side events and you all are invited. One is implementation, the UN Decade of Family Farming to face COVID-19 and achieve resilience and sustainable food system. The next one, driving food loss and waste reduction through innovation. And the third one, data for food security, taking forward the CFS data workstream. Thank you very much for your participation this morning. See you at 2:30. Thank you very much.